Well, good afternoon. I'm John Levy. It's my distinct honor, particularly in its 50th year, to serve as the 10th chair of the Board of Directors of the nation's Legal Services Corporation. And on behalf of our outstanding OSC board, thank you for spending part of 2024's bonus day at this special Take a Leap for Justice Symposium. I do want to thank the MacArthur Foundation for generously supporting this program and Northwestern's Pritzker School of Law for making this terrific auditorium available today. As this is my home city, I need to say thank you to so many of you here who I've leaned on, from joining our Leaders Council and Emerging Leaders Council, serving on task forces and initiatives, and part of a host committee for today, and of course my law firm, Sidley Austin, that has been with me the entire way. And what an extraordinary group of distinguished state and local leaders we have speaking here today, including our Governor, J.B. Pritzker, MacArthur Foundation Board of Directors Chair and LSC's former Vice Chair, Martha Minow, Illinois Supreme Court Chief Justice Mary Jane Tice, Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the Northern District, Rebecca Pallmeyer, the President of the American Bar Association, Chicago, and Mary Smith, the President of the American Law Institute in its 100th year, my brother, David Levy, and of course, our host, Ari Osofsky, Dean of Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, will welcome us at the reception. Senator Dick Durbin, Congressman Darren LaHood, and Los Angeles Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh join us today by video. Our program also features 4 wonderful panels. The executive directors from LSC's outstanding Illinois grantees, covering our entire state, Legal Aid Chicago, Land of Lincoln Legal Aid, and Prairie State Legal Services. They're here with us to discuss their organization's continued efforts to close the justice gap for low-income Illinoisans. With profound thanks to LSC's Leader Council member, Mike Lafrano, Chicago Cubs Executive Vice President, we have a panel of executives from Chicago's sports organizations, including the Cubs, White Sox, Bulls, Fire, and Blackhawks, who will discuss their views on access to justice, and business leaders from Paladin, Mondelez International, the Commercial Club of Chicago, and Joseph P. Kennedy Enterprises will join us in a panel discussion on the role of the corporate sector. Finally, the distinguished deans from all of the law schools in Chicago will discuss the development and impact of the legal aid clinics at their schools and their efforts to encourage the next generation of lawyers to be engaged with and do what they can to help narrow the nation's justice gap. Over the last decade, as our LSC board has recognized the gravity of the crisis in access to justice as it exists for low-income Americans, we wanted to make sure that this 50th anniversary year called attention to the crisis. And with the help of private support, we're developing an outreach campaign, Protecting the Promise. During this anniversary period, LSC will seek to raise greater awareness of the importance of access to justice, the gravity of the crisis for low-income Americans, help to support our stakeholders across the country, and educate and recruit new voices from many sectors of our society to advocate for civil legal aid. This effort will particularly focus on the country's persistent failure to make equal access to justice in our civil justice system a reality for so many Americans. LSC's Justice Gap report, its most recent, which the University of Chicago's NORC helped to develop, quantifies this failure and sums up the dire situation. Low-income Americans do not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their substantial civil legal problems. And here in Illinois, statistics show that only 7% of low-income residents receive adequate legal assistance. The significance of leaving these low-income Americans to fend for themselves is illustrated in matters involving potential eviction, which currently represent on average 40% of the cases handled by our grantees across the country. And LSC statistics alarmingly show that when those individuals or families have a trained representative, they receive a favorable outcome 90% of the time, while those on their own, sadly, are evicted in 90% of such matters. We cannot continue to kid ourselves, folks. The serious chronic underfunding of LSC and its grantees all across the country is helping to fuel this crisis in civil legal aid. LSC's extraordinary network of 131 grantees with more than 900 offices across our country employing over 10,000 lawyers, paraprofessionals are stretching their limited resources to cover as many individuals and families as they possibly can, but the statistics and studies confirm they just have to turn away so many qualified individuals because of a lack of resources. So, as grateful as we are that Congress last year increased LSC's funding to $560 million, clearly much more is needed to close the justice gap after years of wholly inadequate resourcing. Just think about this. 30 years ago, 1994, Congress appropriated $400 million for LSC. So you can see over the past 3 decades, our appropriation, which goes to support direct field services, has increased only modestly, not remotely enough to keep up with the demand. Well, I'm sure that LSC's founders would be very proud of the work of our grantees, but I think it is fair to say they would be dismayed at the lack of appropriate funding. To remedy this, LSC's bipartisan board unanimously last March requested Congress increase our budget to $1.5 billion. In today's program, we will discuss the significance of this justice gap for low-income Americans, which, in my view, threatens both our justice system and the rule of law. That truth was articulated to an ABA audience nearly 60 years ago when the then director of the Office of Economic Opportunity, Sergeant Shriver, longtime head of Chicago's Merchandise Mart, addressed the ABA's annual meeting in Chicago in 1965, and I quote him, "The extension of legal services to the poor is only a means of a more universal end, one we both share, the establishment of the rule of law." He said, adding, "It is that ordered quest for dignity, for justice, and for opportunity, which is the central concern of society today." Well, a year before that, Shriver's brother-in-law and the father of one of our presenters today, then Attorney General Robert Kennedy, gave a Law Day speech at the University of Chicago Law School. Now, you're going to have to, some of you know this, but many of you don't. You have to forgive me a personal moment. I was in high school at that time, and you can imagine how annoyed I was at my parents that I was not invited up to hear Attorney General Kennedy, but they said, well, space is tight and it's for the law students. Well, around 7 o'clock that evening, our house phone rang. There were no cell phones back then. And it was Bobby Kennedy, for me, inviting me to come up and hear him speak if I could get there in 10 minutes. I said, well, Attorney General Kennedy, I'm too young to drive, and we live too far from the law school, so I can't get up there. He said, well, don't worry, I'm just staying down the block from you, so when the talk is over, come down and meet me. And I met him that evening, and here we are 60 years later, and his son, Chris, joins us today in this program. And in his powerful words that day, Kennedy called for lawyers to provide more legal assistance for the poor, noting that, and I quote him, each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and those ripples build a current wave which can sweep down the mightiest walls. Well, 10 years later, the ripple Bobby Kennedy described in his remarks became the wave, known as the Legal Services Corporation. And for 5 decades, it has joined with many of you in working so hard to sweep away many barriers to equal access to justice for low-income Americans. And as we recognize LSC's 50th anniversary, we, all of us, need to redouble our commitment and our efforts to protect the promise of equal justice in America and live up to the closing words of our Pledge of Allegiance by making justice for all a lived reality in our land. Thank you very much. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce the remarkable governor of the state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. Governor Pritzker was first elected to this office in 2018 and re-elected in 2022. Before becoming governor, J.B. founded 1871, a nonprofit small business incubator in Chicago, bringing together the educational and civic resources to support startup businesses. And 1871 has helped entrepreneurs create thousands of jobs and hundreds of new companies in Illinois. Since 1871's creation, Chicago has been named one of the top 10 technology startup hubs in the world by KPMG, Forbes, and others. And it was named the top incubator in the world by UBI Global. Governor Pritzker has also been a key supporter of the Center on Wrongful Convictions at Northwestern University, a center I know well as a founding member of its advisory board, and with the support of Governor Pritzker, the center has become a national leader fighting to reform our criminal justice system and help those who are wrongfully convicted or accused prove their innocence. Governor Pritzker has also served as chairman of the Illinois Human Rights Commission. He received his degree in law from this law school and is a life member of the Northwestern Law Board. Please join me in welcoming my friend and our governor, J.B. Pritzker.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, John, and very kind introduction. Thanks for inviting me to join you today. It is exciting to be here, and it is truly an honor to be up here alongside some truly great people, especially the extremely youthful John Levy, Kennedy-esque, I would say. who never misses a chance, by the way, to promote LSC to me and the work that all of you are doing. So thank you for everything that you have done and are doing for the legal profession and to engage so many people in this very, very important endeavor. Of course, LSC President Ron Flagg and Northwestern Law Dean Hari Osofsky, MacArthur Foundation Board Chair Martha Minow, our Illinois Supreme Court Chief Justice Mary Jane Tice, who swore me in to my second term. Thank you for making it official, and I'll try not to let you down. And our U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine's recovery, Penny Pritzker. And finally, to all of you distinguished guests here today, thanks for all the work that you do for the people of Illinois. I'm in awe of what LSC does day in and day out. Since 1974, standing at the forefront of equal access to justice, serving as the single largest funder of civil legal aid for low-income Americans. And here in Illinois, so much is accomplished because of LSC's work and support for organizations like Land of Lincoln Legal Aid Chicago, and Prairie State Legal Services, led by superstars, truly superstars, Clarissa Gaff and Kate Shank and Denise Conklin. Thank you for your work also. LSC distributes more than 90% of its funding to 131 organizations across the country, serving thousands of low-income individuals, children, families, seniors, veterans in every single congressional district across the nation, 850 offices in all, whether protecting survivors of domestic violence or helping low-income residents in the wake of disasters or helping immigrants who are the victims of serious crimes. LSC operates with the guiding principle that everyone deserves legal representation and access to our justice system, no matter their zip code or their socioeconomic status. It's a mission that I share, and unfortunately, the need has never been greater. You heard John talk about the fact that only 7% of Illinois' low-income residents with civil legal problems receive help. But LSC and its partners have truly stepped up to meet the moment, having served more than 63,000 people in 2022 alone, including veterans, seniors, and domestic violence survivors. And in 2023, LSC dispersed over $17 million in funding to continue helping tens of thousands more Illinoisans with everything from housing disputes to child custody. Many of you in this room are the ones on the ground making sure that our most vulnerable Illinoisans have access to high-quality legal aid. This work isn't easy, and sometimes it's thankless. But I want you to know that I see you, and I see how you've improved the lives of so many of our people. And I want you to know that I'm committed to making sure that we carry forth your work of realizing a more just and equitable legal system. At the state level, we are your allies in providing crucial legal and financial aid to Illinoisans in need in a variety of ways. While the LSC focuses on providing critical civil legal aid to low-income Americans, I'm working to advance legal rights for our residents more broadly across our criminal justice system, too. Working with the General Assembly and with many advocates, some in the room today, over the last 5 years, we truly have made some extraordinary strides in our state. I expunged more than 800,000 low-level cannabis arrest records. And I've pardoned nearly 20,000 people with cannabis convictions. And I've also pardoned many, many others for nonviolent offenses. And during my time in office, Illinois has reduced our prison population, because of the work that we've done, by more than 26%. We've invested hundreds of millions of dollars to lift up communities most harmed by the failed war on drugs, and we've opened and expanded mental health and substance abuse treatment facilities and services. We've transformed our mandatory supervised release system, focusing on creating successful outcomes for those who were formerly incarcerated, our returning citizens. We expanded voting rights also for detainees awaiting trial. In the face of an eviction cliff during the pandemic, I directed the Illinois Housing Development Authority to begin the court-based rental assistance program to help residents in eviction proceedings pay their debts and stay in their homes. And we continue that work today, supporting access to counsel programs for folks in eviction court. This work, done in partnership with organizations like LSC-sponsored ones, is a crucial lever to prevent homelessness in our state and lift families out of crisis. And I have to say, I'm very proud that we have outright eliminated a wealth-based system of pretrial detention. And we replaced it with one that's based on the threat that a defendant poses to the community or their likelihood of fleeing prior to trial. That's how it ought to be done. Community safety ought to be what guides our criminal justice system, not a defendant's wealth. That principle goes hand in hand with ensuring equal access to the justice system for all, not just those who can afford it. And that is the work that LSC does. And I cannot tell you how important it is that we allow people to get their equal rights by having equal access. As many of you know, our state has welcomed tens of thousands of new arrivals from the southern border over the last year and a half. Chicago's legal community has stepped up. I know it's not the direct work of LSC, but many of you are engaged in that work anyway, or your firms are. And it has made a big difference. We've expanded crucial access to immigration-related legal services that so many of those individuals need to navigate our nation's complex and daunting immigration system. Just a reminder, because there are people outside this room who may be watching who don't know this, but the asylum seekers that are here, they are legally in the United States. These are not undocumented people. They're here legally, and we should treat them as we do every resident of Illinois, but we should treat them as such, and that's been one of my missions. As part of these efforts, the Illinois Department of Human Services partnered with the United States Citizen and Immigration Services to stand up legal clinics that help eligible individuals apply for temporary protected status and work authorization. Over 1,000 volunteers, pro bono attorneys, and staff members from our community-based partners have made this possible. In Illinois, we've accomplished quite a lot, yet, to be honest, our work is far from over. I know that more needs to be done to dismantle the structural racism and classism that has plagued our civil and criminal legal systems for far too long. You are on the front lines of this fight, and you are, I know, battle-worn, but never seem to be battle-weary, any of you. Together, we are advancing real justice and accountability in Illinois. Business leaders, academics, lawyers, human rights providers, human services providers, this audience is made up of partners from different backgrounds and career paths, bringing unique perspectives into a broad coalition to accomplish a mission that demands our attention. The collective power that you wield for the common good gives me truly great hope for generations who will live in this state and in this nation. And they will increasingly live up to, as a result of the work that you're doing, increasingly live up to the promise of liberty and justice for all. That is what our nation should be reminding itself every day, maybe especially in 2024. On behalf of the land of Lincoln, the greatest state in the nation, for those of you from out of state, welcome. You can stay in the greatest state in the nation. And thank you for your dedication to our people and communities and our future. Thank you all very much.
Come on, you really are. Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor. And it's wonderful to have such a friend of the legal aid community serving in the governor's office. He really does understand the depth and breadth and seriousness of this issue. We're so grateful to him. And it is now my privilege to introduce my friend Martha Minow, the chairman, or chair, I should say, of the MacArthur Foundation Board. She was elected to that position in 2022, having been on the board now, I think, for more than a decade. As I'm sure most of you know, she is one of the most distinguished members of the Harvard Law School faculty, having served as its dean from 2009 to 2017, and now as the 300th anniversary university professor. She is a national treasure, in my view. She's taught at Harvard Law School since 1981, but probably most importantly, when I came on the OSC board, she was our vice chair. That, as far as I'm concerned, was an extraordinary experience having her as a member of our board, and she helped us lead almost immediately a pro bono task force that has really revolutionized, helped to support pro bono outreach for our grantees. And the other day, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Pro Bono Innovation Fund. And I have to tip my hat to Martha, because we went around the room and we asked our grantees from all across the country, how many of you 10 years ago had a full-time pro bono coordinator? Only 2 hands went up. How many of you have that today? Every hand in the room went up. It's a tremendous contribution that you have made, not only to legal services, but to the orderly functioning of our justice system. She currently co-chairs also, she has to put up with me, the Access to Justice Project of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and she co-chairs the advisory board of MIT's Technology Schwarzman College of Computing. It's wonderful to have you back here in your hometown, Martha Minow.
It is indeed an honor to be here, but anyone who knows John, you just go where John tells you to go. I am thrilled to be here as part of this year-long celebration of the 50th anniversary of Legal Services Corporation, an organization that genuinely makes such a difference in the lives of people, and to be with people, many I know, who are absolutely changing people's lives. So thank you. The MacArthur Foundation is honored to have the chance to be a partner here today. I can't help but acknowledge we are in a crisis. As much as there is progress, and I'm delighted to hear about the progress here in Illinois, COVID was itself a crisis for people who have low economic resources, but it hasn't gotten better. And some of the COVID-related relief is now ending. And we're going to face another cliff right now on evictions, another cliff right now on access to health care and jobs. My old boss, Thurgood Marshall, said the measure of a country's greatness is its ability to retain compassion in times of crisis. That's our challenge. I salute you all and look forward to a really terrific panels. Thank you.
I'm going to ask my panel to join me up here. And while they're doing so, I am Robert Gray. I'm a member of the board of the Legal Services Corporation. And Martha, we miss you every day. Thank you for your service. You know, our opportunity to examine the intersection of corporate responsibility and providing leadership in this very important area of access to justice is so critical, as Martha said, to the way in which our society is evolving. I want you to know that we are joined today by some very special corporate leaders, and their work is phenomenal. And so thank you very much, my colleagues, for joining me today. Let me introduce Kristen Sunda. Kristen is the co-founder and CEO of Paladin, where she works to increase access to justice through advanced technology and helping organizations build compatible and progressive ways to deliver pro bono services. To her right is Derek Douglas. Derek Douglas is the president of the Civil Committee of the Commercial Club of Chicago. My goodness, this guy has got all the business leaders in the community, the philanthropic community, the educational community, advancing ways in which we might build a more progressive way of delivering services to those who are less fortunate. Laura Stein is to his right. Laura Stein is to his right, and she's the Executive Vice President for Corporate and Legal Affairs of Mondelez International. Laura Stein and I go back an awful long ways. Her dad was Executive Director of the ABA when I was President of the association, and her family is well noted for the contributions that they make. Speaking of families and contributions, joined with us on her right is Chris Kennedy, chairman of the Joseph P. Kennedy Enterprises, Inc., where he is responsible for the development of the Kennedy's real estate foundation and holdings.
It's all been on time. All of the real estate's been developed on time. In contrast to me sitting down here, so I apologize. Thank you.
Chris, no apologies necessary. Your time is perfect. But he's also chairman of Top Box Foods, a nonprofit that delivers high-quality, affordable foods throughout the city. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our panelists. Let's get after it. Kristen, can we start with you?
Oh, sure. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have picked the seat closest to you. Let's do it.
Well, you know, so Kristen was asked by John to help co-found and lead the Emerging Leaders Council. She is now a member of the Leaders Council, so she's graduated from that. But Kristen, your efforts in helping us develop that organization and that group of individuals was nothing less than spectacular. So thank you for that. But speak to, and her work in technology and helping those who are trying to develop their own startups is very notable. Working with women and other minority founders, she has developed 2 organizations that have worked diligently in making that happen. This is an important time where technology can serve a very useful purpose, making sure that those who are underserved have access to justice. Would you give us your thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Paladin, and our whole mission is to increase access to justice by helping legal teams run more efficient pro bono programs. And I see the opportunity for technology and AI as really incredible moving forward to help with really 2 buckets of work that we're focused on. The first is thinking about how do we build tools for individuals in need to help navigate our system. And the second is how do we build tools that help the helpers, right? So legal services organizations and pro bono lawyers. My background is with the U.S. Justice Department doing international criminal work in Mexico and Central America. I was splitting my time between D.C. and our embassy in Mexico City, working to extradite fugitives back to the U.S. And it was really at DOJ that I got to see firsthand how complicated our system is to navigate. I was one of the few Latinas on the team, one of the few people who spoke Spanish. And to me, I always say, if you are American, you speak English, you're well-educated, it's hard enough to navigate. And if you're not American, you don't speak English as a first language, and you're not well-educated, it can feel nearly impossible. And so I really got to see the value of having someone help you navigate each step of the process and learned that it could mean the difference between winning and losing your case. And so that's how the kernel for Paladin got started. And after that, joined the founding team of a tech company that we took global. We really scaled it internationally, and that's how I learned how to build a tech business from the ground up. And so Paladin is this intersection of figuring out how do we leverage technology to increase access to lawyers specifically through the pro bono ecosystem. And so through that, we've focused mostly on building tools that help nonprofits and legal services organizations connect more seamlessly through a free platform that we offer to top law firms and corporate teams, bar associations, government attorneys looking to help through a platform where they can enter their cases into a system once, click a button to have them sent out to that network in real time, and on the other side, really aim to increase pro bono engagement while decreasing all the administrative costs and overheads of what used to be a very manual and laborious process. On that side of helping folks get more involved, there are a number of tools that we can build out to make it easier for attorneys to find cases that are going to be a good fit, intake and vet them on the legal services side a lot more seamlessly through technology, route them to the right groups and organizations who can most readily help them, and then build document automation tools, e-filing tools, et cetera, on top of that to help the process of actually helping them a lot faster so we can help more people en masse. On the individual side, I think about all the ways that technology can help through each step of what I call the justice journey. So a low-income individual doesn't wake up one day and they have a legal problem, right? They just have a problem. And so the first step that I think about is how do we leverage tech to help them understand what is their legal issue and what are the potential remedies that they can pursue to solve that problem. I did a Google search last week for something related to eviction, and the second answer that came up was a BuzzFeed source. And I thought to myself, okay, BuzzFeed's great, but I think we can do a better job of leveraging technology and AI into these search engines and other technologies that people are more readily using to direct them to the right resources that we know are going to help them more efficiently and that are going to have some authority behind them. So we can help them identify their legal issues, number one. Number two, we can build out legal navigators, like I know a number of grantees have done here, to help people find the right resources for them. The next step then is helping them build out those document automation tools and e-filing systems so they can put together their case-related documents a lot more efficiently and also accurately in plain language. None of this legalese and legal jargon that's so confusing, even to folks within law, and help them finish their paperwork a lot more efficiently and accurately, and then also e-file it and track it through the system. So throughout all those different steps, whether you're trying to help yourself get through and navigate a case, or you're trying to help the people helping low-income individuals in need, there are a lot of different places throughout that process where we can plug in technology and make the work a lot more efficient and help serve more people more accurately at the end of the day.
Kristen, thank you so much. It is amazing. Technology has become so important that we have technology conferences now at LSC that have grown exponentially in terms of our understanding of being able to flatten that curve of the steep hill people have to climb to get access to justice. So thank you very much for your leadership and your continued involvement. Derek, from the White House to the State House to corporate boards, you have been at the center of a lot of partnerships and collaborations. Tell us the importance of being able to do that as a way of making sure that access to justice is a reality and not just a promise.
Well, can you hear me okay? First of all, thanks for inviting me to be here, John, a good close friend of mine who I met when I was at the University of Chicago, and for all the work that many of you do at LSCs. As Robert mentioned, this organization and the work you do is very near and dear to my heart. I started out my career as a public interest lawyer as well at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, where I was a Skadden Fellow to start, and then I went on at the permanent staff. and so got to see firsthand both the needs that are out there of low-income people to get quality legal support, but also the many challenges that they face in doing so. To your question about partnerships, and I actually think it's absolutely critical, it's foundational for how we need to get things done in society. And I've been fortunate to work in a lot of different venues. I now work at the Civic Committee and the Commercial Club, where I work with some of the largest companies in Chicago to think about how we can have a positive impact on the issues facing our city. I think that, and you know, both attending this event and talking to John more recently, it's got my mind thinking about how the business community can be a more direct partner to the LSC community and the people that are served there. There's a number of things that business does, and I think that the case for business getting involved is clear, because if you want to have a strong business environment, you want to have one that's inclusive of all people, where everyone has access to opportunity, everyone has the ability to fulfill their potential. I was at a meeting with Chris the other day, and he was saying talent is the #1 driver for business. And so low-income people, poor people, how can we make sure that they have economic opportunity to fulfill their talent? I think one way business can help is, you'd mentioned it as well, a lot of the issues, what you're dealing with at LSCs, are economic related at the end of the day, whether it's lending or housing or whatnot. So how can we partner with the communities to create more jobs and create more economic opportunity for those populations? I'm working on an initiative right now out of the Civic Committee where we're trying to create 20,000 jobs for people on the south and west sides of Chicago in some of the most economically challenged areas. We've been talking to the workforce development organizations. That's where you might naturally go to identify who are the people that are having economic need, who we need to get in the pipeline for jobs. It hadn't occurred to me to work with the legal services community, because you're meeting and working with those same populations, to see if we could create a partnership there for you to help identify people that we should be thinking about for employment. I think also, if you think about contributions, John had mentioned some of the lack of funding that exists for the organization. Could the business community step up and see if we could be part of the solution to try to raise resources? Also, you mentioned pro bono. A lot of our Civic Committee members are law firms. One of my members is here somewhere, Craig Martin. I don't know where he is. There he is, waving his hand here. Shy, didn't put it up too high. But obviously, the legal firms are obviously great partners, but at other firms, there's capacity that could be tapped into. They have legal departments, but also there's non-legal issues that some of these organizations face that could be brought. You mentioned lending or other types of kind of advising. We have lots of banks and others that could be helping to work through some of these problems outside of just the legal context. And then the last way I would say that business could partner is by using our voice to help bring more attention to this critical issue. And one thing I've learned in my 18 months now in this job is that in Chicago, when the business community weighs in with its voice, it can be very compelling. It can move the needle on things. We've recently done that with public safety. We're doing it in other areas. No reason we couldn't be thinking about how we could lend our voice to supporting this issue.
Derek, you are absolutely right. And the voice of the corporate community needs to be loud and clear about its commitment. Let me tell you something. Laura Stein has been that voice. Laura Stein is one of the 200 corporate general counsel who signed the letter that went to Congress and said, let's fund LSC at the height at which it needs to be funded to support the services that we need to provide for those who need access to justice. Laura, thank you for being here. She is also the past chair of the organization that I run, the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity. She has been in the trenches for a long time. Laura, give us your views and those of your colleagues as you navigate and help us lead this effort in the corporate community.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Robert, and it's such an honor to be here with you and with all of you. And when, as other people have said, when John gives you a call, you pick up the phone and you're there, because he's just a hero to me. Happy 50th birthday to the Legal Services Corporation and why we're here. To protect the promise. It's awesome. Hey, each of us has our own reasons why we care so much about access to justice. Robert, in the introduction of me, mentioned, kind of how this has just been such a part of my life growing up, and John said essentially the same thing. And so I think if we've been so blessed, as in my case, to have parents, and my father in particular, who as a leader in our profession has always deeply cared and deeply focused on the criticality of access to justice. And then he's instilled those values in me and my sisters, who are all lawyers, and there's 3 of us, and also almost all of our nieces and nephews. My kids are the exception, are now lawyers, including my wonderful nephew, Matt O'Boyle, who's a Loyola law student and here today. But and then I saw the impact of my father, not just on the family, but in partnership with so many other role models like him, making such a difference for other people to decide to go to law school, decide to commit themselves to lifting others up and making that positive difference. So I think one of the things, and Derek said it right, that businesses, like so many other stakeholders in our communities in our world, that if we can inspire each other, we can just do so much more together. Robert, you asked about, kind of why care and why do businesses care? And I think, we realize that you can't have democracy unless you have fairness for all. And you can't have fairness for all unless you have access for all. And if you don't have democracy and you don't have fairness, how are you going to uphold a free society, which we all are so privileged to be part of? And so I think just the importance, and I think hopefully businesses get it too as members of our communities, members of just the fabric of what we do, that if underserved people who are in marginalized communities do not get the access they need, it's not only not creating opportunities for so many people who can create such an impact in our communities, in our world, but it's not going to promote democracy. It's not going to promote who we are. John quoted our Constitution at the outset. So, for the role of businesses in this incredibly, critical, vital mission, there's a lot of reasons why we care that communities are stronger and more fair. There's so many reasons in which it's in our self-interest, like if there's access, potential problems, both on a macro level and on a micro level, can be solved or at least have progress against them before they become much bigger. And so it helps all of us, and it helps business. And I think also, just at Mondelez, my company, do the right thing is our core fundamental value. And our teams, our colleagues, they want to be part of living our values, and they don't want to be at a company that they feel doesn't represent their values. So it's in our best interest. And I think, I look at my own legal team, and I've got some wonderful colleagues here as well, Doug and Jonas, and they represent so many of us. Like, so many people went to law school and became lawyers because they wanted to make that impact in people's lives. And so Derek mentioned the war for talent, and you're not going to attract the best and the brightest unless, not only in their minds, but also in their hearts, it resonates with you and they feel they're part of a culture they want to be part of. And then I think also just there's so much when we get our leaders involved in supporting access to justice, providing pro bono, it lifts up their capabilities, their leadership, and again, that's good for us. But, you know, and I loved all the reasons Derek mentioned why businesses should care, and the same with Kristen about the technology and other things. But I think, you know, we just look at it as a win-win. So if we invest in people, we invest in communities, we win, and it's an investment in us as well. And it's just part of what we should do.
All right, good. Thank you for your continued leadership and that of your family. You have a number of lawyers now that are part of that legacy.
Yeah.
And speaking of legacy, Chris, your time is perfect. Now you can back Keenan.
Okay.
I mean, your family legacy is in the place of civil justice as well. You'd have been proud of what John mentioned with your dad earlier today and the work that he did. I mean, my goodness, he's an iconic figure in this whole struggle. This is not a legal problem. This is an American problem that all of us have to solve. We are in it together, whether we like it or not. And to the extent that Derek mentioned, if we don't do that, then we're going to get a new microphone. Thank you. That in order to have the stable workforce, in order for people to prosper in this country, access to justice, as Laura said, is essential. Speak to that for us in terms of your participation on many corporate boards, part of the investment community, and those that have a real stake in making sure that America works in terms of making access to justice not only fair, but affordable as well.
Well, I appreciate that question. Before I answer it, I just want to acknowledge John Levy and respond to that story you told, that nice story about his efforts to meet my father. One of the great thrills of my time, 35 years here in Chicago, was meeting John's father at the Quadrangle Club down at the University of Chicago. And I had grown up knowing who he was, because I grew up in Washington, D.C., right outside of the city in McLean, Virginia. And many of the people who were part of my parents' social life, and therefore I knew them, they were all Justice Department lawyers or U.S. attorneys from all over the United States. And they were distraught about what was happening under the Nixon White House and Nixon Justice Department. And they thought the United States Department of Justice would be permanently diminished by what Nixon had done during the Saturday Night Massacre. And then your father became the Attorney General of the United States, and everybody around my parents, my uncle Ted Kennedy, who was the head of the Judiciary Committee, were thrilled. And they thought, finally, somebody who's worthy of the Justice Department will lead it. And he turned he restored people's faith in the Justice Department. So thank you for the opportunity to meet one of the greatest men of the 20th century. Thank you, John. Should I just go now?
Go.
Okay, I meant leave after those comments, but because they're important to me. I do think that not everybody feels like the folks feel in this room that this issue matters. And I think it's important to think about how to reach folks who are either oblivious, turn a blind eye, or a deaf ear. I think about how I learned about the importance of a fair society and the rule of law. And I grew up, as I said, outside of Washington, D.C. in McLean, Virginia, a house called Hickory Hill, where my mother and father had raised my 11 brothers and sisters. And we would have people like, Martin Luther King's family would come by, Mrs. King, Coretta, and then Marty and the rest of the family were regular visitors, and Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and Sidney Poitier. And one time, Stephen Stills stopped by. I was telling the kids the story the other day, and he drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels. And I was about 12 years old, and I was the oldest at home, and my mother was looking at me like I needed to deal with this issue. But it was all, it was really interesting stuff. But Stills, who had written maybe the greatest anti-war song of our generation anyways, it was incredible to meet him, but he said to me, what are you guys doing? And my younger brother Max, who was about 10 or 9, and Douglas was about 8 or 7, and Rory's about 6. We're like, what do you mean, what are we doing? He said, what are you doing, to carry on that legacy, to continue to fight for civil rights here and human rights abroad? And that notion of, I guess, maybe a little peer pressure, a little bullying maybe, but it's important to have people in your lives who are going to push you in that way. And we need to become the people in other people's lives who push them to make this country better. I think for me and our family, the issues around fairness, around the rule of law, around civil rights and human rights, it's in our DNA. And I think it needs to be in the DNA of every American.
Chris, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, all of you, for your leadership and for your contributions today. I will note Chris is a Boston College Eagle. Laura is a Big Green Dartmouth graduate.
And Harvard.
And Harvard. We're just doing undergrad. Chris,
But Martha's my...
I know, you got to do it. And Kristen, Princeton Tiger, you know I'm going to save the best for last, right? Derek, national champion, Michigan Wolverine. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking our family. Mary Smith, come on up here, stand beside me. It is my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, the current president of the American Bar Association, Mary Smith. Mary is the first Native American woman in her role as the president of the largest professional association in the world. Graduate of the University of Chicago and Loyola University. She has done amazing things in the public sector, the political sector, the private sector. And you know what? The one thing that I am most proud to tell you about Mary is that she is the founder and president and chair of the Carolyn Ora Smith Foundation, named after her mother and her grandmother, works to train Native American girls in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math. But she also, as president of the American Bar Association, appointed the Task Force for Democracy, for American democracy, co-chaired by former U.S. Circuit Court Judge J. Michael Ludick and former Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson. Mary, your work is stellar. We appreciate your being here. Keep up the good work. Mary Smith, President of American Bar.
Well, thank you, Robert, for that gracious introduction. I think I'll just take you everywhere I go. I want to thank John, of course, for all the work he does every day, and he's tireless, as you all can see, and to the whole Legal Services Board, of which Robert's a member. So grateful to all the work you all do. And thank you to Northwestern Law School for hosting us today, and Dean Osofsky. And I want to acknowledge the Executive Director of the American Bar Association, Alpha Brady. Well, I'm so pleased to be with you all today. The ABA and the Legal Services Corporation have long enjoyed a history of partnership and collaboration, and I'm pleased to carry on that tradition today. I want to spend my time today talking about critical connections. The connection between the ABA and LSC, the connection between the legal profession and the rule of law, and the connection between the justice system and American democracy. When I began my presidency of the American Bar Association, I set out two priorities aimed at charting the course of the future of the legal profession, the role of technology in our field, and the protection of American democracy. We are right now facing a critical moment in the history of our nation. More than half of Americans, 51%, say they are dissatisfied with how democracy is working. Less than 1/3 of millennials consider it essential to live in a democracy. And 1 in 5 U.S. adults can't name any of our branches of government. With these trends we're seeing, it's the responsibility of every citizen, and especially those of us who have dedicated our lives to the field of the law, to ask ourselves, why do people feel this way? What is the data telling us? Perhaps the message we should be receiving is that for large swaths of our populace, the system is not working. The system doesn't work when low-income Americans don't receive any or enough legal help for 92%. That's right, 92% of their civil legal problems. It doesn't work when the disabled veteran with severe PTSD is denied her benefits not once, not twice, but 3 times. The system doesn't work when the senior citizen who has lost her ID cards and couldn't access her bank account falls behind on rent and is at risk of losing her home. It doesn't work when the mother whose son with developmental disabilities has to fight to get Social Security income they are qualified for in order to help provide for the care her child needs. For far too many Americans, the system is not working. The scales of justice are imbalanced, leaving millions to struggle with issues like debt, eviction, foreclosures, repossessions, and family safety matters without the necessary legal help. For decades, the American Bar Association has advocated for legal services funding as the embodiment of the federal government's role in securing the core American value of equal justice under law, a value that is crucial to our national democratic system. And yet, as the numbers tell us, we continue to fall short. The inadequate funding of legal representation for low-income Americans was illuminated by a report released at the end of last year by the American Bar Association. It provides a stark look at the national distribution of legal aid resources. Nationwide, there are just 2.8 paid legal aid lawyers for every 10,000 U.S. residents in poverty. The report also detailed the number and location of paid civil legal aid attorneys, finding that they make up less than 1% of the 1.3 million lawyers in the country. The bottom line is clear, although distressing. There simply aren't enough legal aid lawyers for all low-income Americans facing civil legal issues. And as a result, many economically disadvantaged individuals must navigate complex legal systems alone, often facing adverse effects on crucial aspects of their lives. So, not to be a downer, so what can we all do to ensure that more people have equal access to lawyers? By examining the root causes of why so many lack legal representation, we can begin to implement effective strategies to improve access to justice. Better pay, that's the bottom line. Even with 11 to 15 years of experience, legal aid lawyers earn a median salary of $78,500 per year, half the average lawyer's salary of $163,000 nationwide. To attract more attorneys to the profession, we must address the income gap. Rural justice. Large swaths of rural areas in every state have fewer attorneys of any kind, or in fact, many of them have no lawyers at all. We must support programs that incentivize lawyers to move to rural areas, create online legal clinics, and continue experimenting with ways to bridge the rural justice gap. Adequate funding, you've heard about that already. LSC provides nearly $500 million to legal aid programs nationwide, distributed in proportion to poverty populations. State and local governments, as well as private philanthropy, attempt to fill the gap, but much, much, much more is needed. I gave remarks at our ABA House of Delegates meeting earlier this month in Louisville, where I spoke about the need to meet this moment in our country's history, and to do that by meeting people where they are. Democracies thrive when every citizen believes they have access to the legal system. We must meet people, including those with low incomes, where they are in order to fulfill our nation's promise of justice for all. We are called in this profession not only to serve our clients, but to be stewards in upholding the rule of law. It is our duty, our responsibility to uphold these ideals and to ensure that all people in our country receive the legal help they need when they need it the most. Thank you so much.
Mary, thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you so much to the ABA for being a partner in access to justice for 50 years. And now I'd like my colleagues to join us, and we're going to see a short video as an introduction to our work.
My name is Huma. I'm from Pakistan. I came here in 2003 with my ex-husband. And I have two daughters, beautiful daughters. One born here and one came from Pakistan. First, I was living in an apartment in Chicago. Then my parents sent me some money for the down payment, so we bought a house. There was a time when my ex-father died and he went to Pakistan to sold his property. So after that, everything changed. So then I started to talk to my friends at my work. So there was my great friend Leslie. She told me about the Prairie State. She told me, you need to go there and tell them your story so they will be able to help you. So then the case started. When the case started, so I've been able to get the protection order and he was out of the house. That was first day for my freedom, for me and for my kids, I think so. So I'm so proud to give me those services. I mean, if you would not help me at that point, at my lowest, then maybe I could be on the street, or I don't know where I could be or my kids would be. But now I got my house, I got justice. I have my car, I have my job. My kids going to school and college, they are working, so that's how we are surviving. We are so much better than before.
What an inspiring story. And Huma's story is by no means unique. Every day, tens of thousands of low-income Americans are assisted in their most critical, life-impacting problems by legal aid lawyers around the country. And I'm a lucky guy. I get to talk about and shine a spotlight on their stories as part of my day job. I'm Ron Flagg, president of the Legal Services Corporation. And I'm thrilled today to be joined by three heroic executive directors of our programs here in Illinois. Kate Shank, the executive director of Legal Aid Chicago, centered here in obviously Chicago. Denise Conklin from Prairie State Legal Services, whose main office is in Rockford. And Clarissa Gaff from Land of Lincoln Legal Aid, whose main office is in East St. Louis. Let's give them a round of applause. Together, Clarissa, Kate, and Denise and their colleagues represent the three grantees that served over 63,000 Illinois residents annually, including over 1,400 veterans, over 6,000 seniors, and over 5,000 survivors of domestic violence. They're here today to help us understand the true impact of these numbers, the stories like the one we just heard, and the ways in which legal aid impacts people's lives from the time they're young all the way through their senior years. Welcome. We'd like to hear each of you talk briefly about your programs. Kate, let's start with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ron. I'm Kate Shank. I'm the CEO of Legal Aid Chicago. And I am so grateful to be here. I'm just so proud of the tremendous work of LSC over the last 50 years to really firm up and establish and support legal aid across this country. I'm thankful for all of you, the time that you are spending here today and your support of civil legal aid, and of course, of my two fellow programs and my colleagues that are here. Thank you. So Legal Aid Chicago is the LSC-funded organization. We serve Cook County, so that means the city of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs, and we provide some of our services statewide. There are about 1 million people who are financially eligible for our services in our service area. So to talk about financial eligibility, just very briefly, what that means is that a family of 4 can, generally speaking, not earn more than $39,000 a year and remain eligible for our services. And we know that even for middle-income families, the cost of legal representation is challenging. But for low-income families, it is frankly out of reach. They will be alone, protecting their personal safety, protecting their housing, their jobs, their children's education, unless they have a civil legal aid attorney standing next to them. We do not charge for our services ever, and that is thanks to the support from LSC, thanks to government and foundation grants, to our law firms and corporate sponsors, and to our individual donors. Real briefly about our clients. Legal Aid Chicago, about 85% or so of our clients are people of color. 2/3 are women, and about 1/3 are people living with disabilities. We cover the full range of civil legal aid issues, which you've heard a little bit about today, and we're going to have the chance to speak on in a little bit more depth on many more this afternoon. But we get the most number of calls, as was mentioned earlier, on issues related to housing and to family law, particularly domestic violence. But really for all of the legal issues where we handle, there is a huge need for our services. We are located physically about 2 miles from here. That's our main office, but we do have outposts in the form of help desks and clinics all around the city and county. We have about 220 full-time staff, 115 attorneys, 60 paralegals, and then 15 other intake and social work folks, all of whom work to provide direct representation, to provide brief services and advice to our clients. Our work every year for our clients and their family members who live with them impacts around 24,000 people. Though we provide a lot of short-term service for our clients, so the advice, the letters, the phone calls, where we really spend our time is in direct representation on complicated matters that require an attorney to appear in court or in an administrative proceeding, both in our local courts, but also in appellate and federal courts as well.
Clarissa?
Good afternoon. I'm Clarissa Gaff, and I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank John and Ron for inviting me to participate. We've really enjoyed LSC support for the past 5 decades for our work, and we couldn't begin to serve the numbers of people that we do without LSC support. So thank you very, very much. We're just very grateful. Land of Lincoln Legal Aid serves 65 counties in Illinois. That's the lower 2/3 of the state. The area is pretty large. It's about the size of Indiana. And we serve a variety of geographic regions, right? We serve urban populations in Champaign and our state capital of Springfield, but we also serve counties where deer outnumber the people. We have a staff of about 150. 75 of those folks are attorneys, 12 of those are social workers, and the rest are our support staff, all dedicated to serving individuals. We serve folks through 5 regional offices, 4 satellite offices, a legal advice and referral center, and then we're embedded in a number of places in our communities, including hospitals, doctors' offices, and schools. About 740,000 people are eligible for our services in those 65 counties, and we're only able to help about 13,000 folks annually with their civil legal problems. So it's a drop in the bucket, and we are rationing our services, right? We do a merit screening to determine whether someone's going to get advice and a brief service, or if they're going to get full representation in, as Kate mentioned, a complex matter where an attorney can really make the difference. 70% of our clients are women, and about 1/3 as well have disabilities. Our top areas of requests for help are much like Kate's in the eviction arena and in family law, particularly for domestic violence survivors. I'm going to turn it over to Denise so she can share a little bit more about Prairie State.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Conklin. I'm the Executive Director at Prairie State Legal Services. Thank you to Ron. Thank you to LSC broadly and the board. Thank you to my board members who are here. And thank you to all of you for your interest in this really important issue. So as with my colleagues, Prairie State Legal Services is an LSC-funded legal aid organization. We cover 36 counties in Illinois. So between our 3 organizations, we have Illinois covered with LSC's support. Our counties at Prairie State cover northern Illinois outside of Chicago and central Illinois, bordering in the Peoria, Bloomington, Kankakee area. So in those 36 counties, we have 11 local offices. We are, as my colleagues, committed to being in our communities so that we can respond to the community needs as they grow and change and have different focus. For our shop, we handled approximately 16,000 cases last year, and nearly half of them were housing, so that is continuing to be a repeated theme in our communities. Approximately half of our clients are people of color, and in our service area, about 228,000 households are at the very extreme poverty level. And we unfortunately do not have all the resources to meet those needs, but we try. And we'll talk a little bit about the volunteer program that we use to try to multiply that effect, thanks to LSC, as we've heard about earlier. Our clients include children who are being wrongfully denied school services. They are families who are surviving domestic violence, and they are veterans who are trying to access public benefits that they are eligible for but are meeting a barrier, and we'll go into those cases in more detail during this panel. Our 3 pillars at Prairie State, the way we describe them, are safety, housing, and financial stability. And financial stability includes that access to needed public benefits as well as access to jobs, ready-to-work programs to help people move from poverty into sustainable jobs. Thank you for this opportunity to share, and I look forward to this panel discussion.
So we're in just a few minutes going to go through the entire lifetime of people living in poverty in Illinois and see how our colleagues here help them through every phase of life. Let's turn first to child advocacy work. What does it look like from your team's perspectives to work with Illinois' youngest residents? Denise?
Thanks, Ron. So child advocacy, a very important area that we all serve. So child advocacy work really is to help the kiddos, the children in our service area for relating to civil legal needs. The child advocacy work that I'm going to highlight here does highlight a partnership between our volunteer attorney program, our pro bono program, and our Prairie State staff attorneys. And the legal issue I'd like to highlight in this story is child abuse. So in the particular story I'd like to share with you, there are 3 little girls involved, and at the age that this started, they were 4, 3, and just an infant, and they were sisters living with their mom, and their father was unfortunately extremely abusive. And this all came to a head in an ER visit when one of the children had a fractured skull. Illinois' DCFS, Department of Children and Family Services, became involved, removed the 3 girls, and placed them with their maternal grandparents. And that's about when Prairie State got involved, but not quite yet. The grandparents started caring for the girls, but the father would not stop the abuse, and the harassments and the threats to the children and to the grandparents began. The grandparents called the police, and the police directed the grandparents to get an order of protection and then call Prairie State. Prairie State attorneys became involved and represented the children in an order of protection along with the grandparents. It was a long, challenging, contested hearing process, but the judge granted a 2-year plenary order of protection to protect the children from their father and also protect the grandparents. And that was great. That was a good, safe space to be in, but the grandparents started talking about a permanent solution for those children and whether adoption should be something that they looked into to become the legal parents of those 3 little girls. And Prairie State walked that journey with the grandparents in thinking that through and partnered with a local attorney who specialized in adoption law and referred the grandparents to that pro bono attorney to provide free legal services under LSC's pro bono program with Prairie State, and was successful in a pretty straightforward adoption. And now those grandparents are the legal parents of those 3 little girls living in safety. So child abuse is just one area of child advocacy that our different legal aid organizations focus. But we also focus our child advocacy work on education law. That is where children in this country are entitled to a free, appropriate public education. And that is something we do at Prairie State, but I'm going to turn it over to my colleague here, Kate, and she will share more about that important area of our work.
Thanks, Denise. So our representation for kids in education matters focuses on special education and school discipline. So special education is support for children who have disabilities to make sure that they receive the school services and the school support that they're entitled to receive under the law that Denise mentioned. In school discipline matters, we represent children who are being pushed out of school due to a disciplinary issue. It is well documented that children of color and children with disabilities are far more likely to face these types of school pushouts, and those are typically the types of children that we are representing. Legal Aid Chicago is really fortunate to have a contract to allow us to represent youth in foster care in their education-related needs. And through our 3 partnership here, we are allowed and are able to serve youth in foster care throughout the entire state. So through this special contract, we are not only advocating in an area that has a huge influence over a child's life, but really for children who are very, very particularly vulnerable. So children who are living in foster care are incredibly mobile. They move homes, they move schools far more often than a typical child. They also have a lot worse educational outcomes. They are more likely to be suspended and expelled. They are more likely to repeat a grade, and they are less likely to graduate from high school. They also have really high levels of trauma that follow them into the classroom. And these create such significant vulnerabilities that Illinois' Child Protective Services, the Department of Children and Family Services, recognized that they need special care and sought us out to provide that legal representation for those children. So One of our clients, I'm going to call her Madison, is a real example of how special education and school discipline collide. So Madison is a 7th grader, and she had recently entered the foster care system when she became our client. She had several mental health diagnoses, and she was getting therapy outside of school for that situation. The school knew about this, but the school did not assess her for any school-related care. So Madison had a history, she's a 7th grader, remind. She had a history of drinking in order to self-numb. And one day she brought a water bottle with alcohol and juice to school. And when she offered it to another student, the school found out and confronted her about it. And her reaction as a 12-year-old was fight or flight, and she ran from school. Now, instead of looking at this child and determining this child needs extra help and support, the school instead moved to expel her. And by expelling her, what that really means, and this is where it gets very bad, it means that this child and any other child that is expelled no longer has a right to return to any public school in Illinois for up to 2 years. So she could have been out of school for a significant period of time at such a really young age. So we represented Madison both before the school board and then before the Illinois State Board of Education by filing an administrative due process case. The school board moved forward with their decision to expel her. But they said, it's okay, we'll put her in an alternative school. But this is not a solution that would have resulted in any real education for Madison because, as I said, she could have easily moved school districts due to foster care placements, and the next school would not have had to take her. And an alternative school just is not the right level of education. It wouldn't have provided Madison the services that she needed. There's limited course offerings. There are no extracurricular activities, and there's very minimal college and career counseling offered at that school. What we did is we were able to successfully advocate for her ultimately for the school district to determine that she needed special education services. She was entitled to them due to her disability, so we got her an IEP. We were able to prove that the school should have evaluated her for those services, and if they had done that, she probably wouldn't have been in the situation in the first place, or at the bare minimum, they would have not expelled her due to a reason that was quite clearly connected to her disability. So ultimately, we got her that IEP. We were able for the school to take the expulsion off of her record, and she was able to continue in her schooling. LSC funds also allow us to expand our representation of youth and education matters beyond kids in foster care. So in our region, there is just a real dearth of free legal aid on school discipline issues, which are very, very complicated. Even well-resourced parents find it impossible to navigate the system without representation. So we are one of the few legal aid organizations that is doing this work. And we're also, through the help of LSC, able to represent students who have been sexually harassed and abused in schools, which is another area that's greatly lacking in representation. And again, LSC funds have been critical. So I'd like to now turn it over to Clarissa, please, who's going to continue and share an example of their representation of a child with disabilities.
Yeah, so I'm going to share a little bit more about how we work in the education context to ensure that children who are our most vulnerable citizens really get the education they're entitled to. One individual we helped, she's a 13-year-old girl who I'm going to call Brianna. Brianna was living with her parents and her siblings when at age 4, she was diagnosed with lead poisoning. And unfortunately, her parents abused drugs and her family was often homeless. By the time we met with Brianna at age 13, she had moved over 20 times in the past 4 years. She had bounced between many schools, and she was living in foster care. She was chronically absent. Unfortunately, she missed 15 to 20% of all school days in each school year for 4 years. Brianna at one point had actually been diagnosed with a learning disability, but she was found ineligible for support for that disability because of her chronic absenteeism. She'd also been held back 4 times. So by the time we met Brianna, she was in 4th grade, but she should have been in 7th grade. Try to picture a 13-year-old in a 4th grader's desk. Think about how much bigger she is than her peers, and that was Brianna. Despite her diagnosed disabilities, Brianna didn't have an individualized education plan, an IEP, even though she was entitled to one to ensure her success in school. And her family recognized that something wasn't right, that she shouldn't be in 4th grade, and so they actually reached out to DCFS, who put her in contact with Land of Lincoln Legal Aid. After we had worked with Brianna and her guardian for a while, we filed a request with the Board of Education asking for a hearing. Through this resolution process at the Board of Education, we did reach an agreement. Brianna was assessed immediately and offered an individualized education plan that she should have had. More importantly, Brianna received compensatory education. And what that really meant was, beyond the regular school day, Brianna got 3 hours of work with a special education tutor every day after school for dozens of weeks. She received individual special education instruction for an entire summer. She received weekly counseling and tutoring. So as a result, when the next school year came around, Brianna was enrolled in 8th grade with the supports and accommodations she needed to flourish at her school.
Thanks for sharing really those moving stories about the work you do with the most vulnerable children in our communities. Jumping ahead 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, talk about the work you do to help working age residents from Illinois.
Thanks, Ron.
Kate?
So the transition of youth into adulthood is a great place for me to share about our records relief work. So criminal records and contact with the police, even when it happened when someone was a child, can follow them into adulthood and really have an impact on their ability to be financially stable and to be independent. So we represent both youth and working age adults who have arrests and convictions to expunge or seal their records. So time and again, research and reports on the topic of records relief shows that expungement and sealing reduces recidivism. It helps to reduce poverty and by removing barriers to employment, to housing, to professional licensure. So this is really about work that gets people back to work. Today, our organization, Legal Aid Chicago, has over 1,100 open criminal records relief cases between our juvenile records team and our adult records team. So our clients with juvenile records, they can be minors that are currently in the midst of the criminal legal system, but they can also be adults, and they often are, and they come to us as adults in direct response to an immediate and a distinct barrier to a goal or objective they have, which is usually about employment, and it's usually about housing. So what happens with our adults that have these lingering juvenile records is they come to us because, they are, for example, we have clients who, a number of them, who have graduated from nursing school, which is a great example. They have graduated, they've passed, but when they go to get their license, they're unable to because of a juvenile record that they may not have known even still existed. So this work in our area has really been strongly supported by LSC, and in particular by the LSC programs that target pro bono partnerships. So we applied for and we received a special grant from LSC to partner with law firms and with corporate legal departments to expunge or seal eligible criminal records in order to disrupt what we've heard of as the school-to-prison pipeline. And these partnerships have just been an absolutely incredible, positive relationship for us and results for our clients. So what happens in this partnership is our paralegal will screen clients for eligibility. And then they'll pass it over to our attorneys who will do a deeper dive to figure out, are the records, are the arrests, and so forth, are they actually eligible for expungement or sealing? Our attorney then will create what's called a case chart, and we'll pass that over to a pro bono attorney, who will use that information to create the petition necessary to expunge or seal that criminal record. The pro bono attorney will then pass it back over to us, and we will review it, make sure it's good to go, and get it filed in court. So despite really clear eligibility for these types of relief, courts typically do not just grant them. Very often, our attorneys are required to go to court and to litigate and have a hearing and to represent our client in the hearing in order to have their records expunged or sealed. And when that's what's needed, that is what we do. So these can be very full representation cases that would just be impossible to receive support and relief without an attorney. Last year, Legal Aid Chicago partnered with 29 law firms and corporate legal departments to serve clients in this area, and we are on track to do the same or to do more this year. So records relief really is just such an incredible, broad, and sweeping legal remedy that directly contributes to the general legal aid mission of access to justice and access to opportunity. So I'd like to turn it over to Clarissa next.
Thank you, Kate. And records relief is truly transformative in people's lives. I want to talk about another area of law that we all work in, which is helping families when they experience domestic violence. Survivors may need our help to obtain an order of protection, to sever that relationship with that abusive person, and then also to obtain safety and security so they can move on with their lives. So all of us devote a lot of resources to helping domestic violence survivors obtain those orders of protection that puts their abuser away from them, that limits contact, limits harassment, limits the threatening ability, and prevents it from happening. And then we all may help them with broader actions, long-term actions like divorces or child custody matters that also does that. We help these survivors obtain all the remedies they need to move on, including child support and maintenance, sole possession of a home or a car, and in some instances, help them make sure that abuser does not have any access to firearms. Sometimes we help survivors work with their landlords to change the locks or frankly to rewrite the lease so their abuser cannot return to the home. Or sometimes, as Kate mentioned, we help them clear their criminal record so they can obtain a job and they can be economically safe, secure, and stable and independent. We're committed, all of us, to providing holistic legal services to help that individual get to a better place. Helping survivors is one of the biggest ways we collaborate in our communities. In the 65 counties our office serves, we work with over 12 shelters and domestic violence service providers. And we do this not just to help individual clients, but also to address problems we may see with courts or with law enforcement agencies. I want to tell you a little bit more about one of our newest domestic violence collaborations, which I'm very excited about, which means I run the risk of talking way too fast because I get excited, and then I'll be unintelligible. So I'm really going to do my best to tamp down. We've long worked with Quinata, which is a shelter and domestic violence service provider in Quincy, Illinois, on the other side of the state from here. And they serve a 5-county region, but it's roughly 2.5 hours away from our nearest service office. Historically, the way we serve survivors in those communities was by using LSC funds to pay local attorneys to represent our clients. However, the number of private attorneys willing to do this work up there has diminished over the years. And to be very honest, that area that Quinata serves, that 5-county region, is pretty much a legal desert. 3 of the 5 counties that they serve have 10 or fewer attorneys practicing in them. So there aren't even really attorneys to take our cases. Quinata has constantly reminded us of how much they need our help up there, and we have done our best to serve it, although for a significant period of time, judges up there would not allow us to appear remotely. So in 2022, and sort of a felicitous turn of events, the state of Illinois allocated more money to help domestic violence survivors. And Quinata reached out to us and said, hey, Land of Lincoln, why don't you open a law office with this funding in Quincy? And at the same time, Ascend Justice, which is a Chicago-based nonprofit law firm that helps survivors of gender-based violence, reached out to us. And they said, hey, we know there are rural residents in Illinois who are not getting the support they need when they survive domestic violence. What can we do to help? And our Quincy Legal Partnership was born. So with the help of that funding and also LSC funding, Land of Lincoln opened a law office in Quincy in early 2023. And we worked directly with Quinata to meet the needs of survivors in that 5-county community. Quinata refers clients to us for help in all the areas I've already detailed. But Land of Lincoln doesn't help all the cases that come in. We can't begin to, and we also don't meet the needs of some of those survivors, which is where Ascend Justice comes in. They provide remote legal help to individuals who have immigration cases or other individuals who may need help with family defense representation because DCFS has an open investigation or an open appeal, and they need the help of Ascend Justice. We've all collaborated to train our staff to recognize the legal needs as well as the law. We've trained to come up with a great seamless referral service so I can contact Ascend if we see a client who needs their help. Similarly, we may reach out to Quinata for additional services for our clients. Our partnership aims to remedy the legal desert for survivors of gender-based violence in that region and provide them with the legal and supportive services they need to survive and thrive. Our leadership is committed. We meet quarterly to troubleshoot, and we're all strongly committed to the vision of ensuring that victims in that particular area, survivors in that area, have access to legal services. I'm going to turn it over to Denise because I know Prairie State also zealously is committed to serving domestic violence survivors.
Yeah, thank you, Clarissa. And the story I would like to highlight on a survivor of domestic violence really focuses on our veterans work. So all 3 of our organizations with LSC support focuses on providing civil legal services to our veterans of the United States. And this particular story touches on both our veterans work and our domestic violence work. So Danielle is the individual I will be talking about. She is an ambassador for our work and just a true survivor. At the time she came to us, she was a single mom. She had been in the Army for many years and was currently a member of the Army Reserves in Illinois. And at the time, she was married to her husband. Danielle's husband had been great prior to their marriage, but then once they became married, some abuse started to happen. And once they had their son, the abuse escalated. And that was in April of 2020, of course, right when the pandemic hit. Danielle's husband would not let her leave when they would begin to have an altercation, and would often physically restrain her. On one occasion, Danielle tried to leave when they began to have an altercation. He pushed her to the ground, grabbed her neck, choked her, and then stomped on her ribs. Despite that, Danielle did not seek legal help, but continued on. However, when Danielle's husband began to abuse their son, she stepped forward and turned to Prairie State Legal Services for help. So as a first step, we assisted Danielle with an order of protection that covered both Danielle and her son against her husband, which was successfully obtained by the court. And then we represented Danielle in a divorce action for the permanent solution for her family. And then that was successful as well. And Danielle is now doing much better. She works for a private company and has received multiple promotions, including using her Army Supply Specialist training in her work as an inventory associate. She has also completed classes to obtain her real estate license and has passed the national exam. Danielle now lives in a supportive community with her son, who attends a good school in Illinois, and she and her son are now safe and building a happy and productive life here in Illinois. So just another example of the importance of the work to support our survivors of domestic violence and our veterans.
Thanks, Denise. So because domestic violence is such a significant issue for the clients of our 3 organizations and across the country, I'd also like to share some information about a specific area that we do. And that is an amazing partnership that we've had for 10 years and counting with a private law firm, Denton's, where we are handling appeals for protective orders that have been wrongfully denied in the lower courts or where the courts have made not provided all the remedies that are available. We are so proud of this project and the truly incredible results that we've been able to achieve through it. So basically what happens is when a survivor of violence has been denied an order of protection, we assess the case to determine that it has merit. And if we make that assessment, we pass it over to the firm, Denton's, and they will obtain the transcript and they'll write the appeal with our support. So this collaboration has a near 100% success rate, either in overturning the lower court's ruling or in the lower court changing its mind and making the decision that is right and protects the survivor. It has resulted in published opinions that have been cited not only in Illinois, but across the country. So it is really having an impact on protecting and providing guidance for survivors of domestic violence broadly. So in a recent published opinion, our client had an abuser who was trained in mixed martial arts fighting. He had a long history of very serious physical abuse of our client. And what happened in the recent incident was he punched her in the head, resulting in her having to go to the hospital. He also used his training to take his arm and subdue and to choke her. When she sought an order of protection, she was denied. And we appealed this case because the lower court denied the order of protection because they said she had instigated the abuse by pouring water on him. So in essence, it was her fault. So in their published decision, the appellate court got it right, thankfully, and ruled that the prior history of abuse needs to be considered. It vindicated that survivors are not responsible for their own abuse, and it provided guidance to courts going forward on how to correctly interpret the law.
Thank you, Kate. Our last segment, obviously one that I have a particular interest in, we want to talk about our senior population. What do legal aid lifelines look for legal aid in Illinois? Clarissa?
Yeah, well, Ron, I know you're a happy grandparent, and I imagine that's because you only have to visit them. But I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I'm speaking as a mother of a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and sometimes I'd like to just visit them. But I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there are more than 2.3 million grandparents out there who are raising their grandchildren. And half of those households are low income. There are really all sorts of reasons for this. Some of these children, their parents are dead. The COVID epidemic made 140,000 orphans out there, and grandparents had to step in. Substance abuse by parents is another really big reason. The opioid epidemic has forced a lot of grandparents to step in and take care of their grandchildren because parents can't parent sometimes while they're addicted to drugs, or they may be incarcerated. And grandparents have to step in every way, emotionally, financially, and legally. Grandparents find that they need to get a legal guardianship of a grandchild to enroll them in school or maybe take that kid to the doctor and make medical decisions. So Land of Lincoln, as well as Legal Aid Chicago and Prairie State, we all help grandparents obtain guardianships. One grandparent we helped is a woman I'm going to call Marie, who had been raising her granddaughter, who I'm going to call Jessica, since birth. Jessica had cerebral palsy and needed a trach for breathing. She had received health benefits from the state of Illinois since birth. And what those benefits entitled Jessica to was in-home nursing help with her daily care. It allowed her to remain in her home and not be hospitalized. As Jessica approached 17, the state cut the hours of care that she was entitled to from 90 hours to 55 hours. And so her grandma, Marie, had to step in. Grandma Marie was watching Jessica and helping Jessica for 16 hours a day, including she wouldn't sleep at night. She would monitor Jessica because if her trach got clogged, she would lose air and could die in a matter of minutes. So Marie finally called Land of Lincoln, and she was exhausted and frazzled and frustrated. We immediately helped her file an appeal of the state's decision to cut the in-home care hours for Jessica. And while that appeal was pending, Jessica turned 18 and the MITRE guardianship of her expired. So we helped Marie get an adult guardianship of Jessica so she could continue to be in her life and help her make decisions. I regret to inform you the appeal was denied at the administrative agency. So we appealed it to circuit court, where we won. And after 2 years of this pending, Jessica finally received a reinstatement of 90 hours of in-home care weekly, and Marie no longer had to spend 16-hour shifts taking care of her granddaughter. As a result, Jessica continues to live in her grandmother's home with a family who loves her and cares for her. And Marie can really be the best caretaker she can be because she's not having to work 16-hour shifts and be exhausted. So, Denise, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you too do a lot of work for seniors, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes, definitely. And the story I'd like to highlight really relates to public benefits work. So we had talked about it in the introduction that generally our work can be divided into 3 categories: safety, housing, and public benefits. And public benefits for our senior population can address some of the issues our most vulnerable are facing in civil legal aid. These can be wrongful denials of all kinds of different government public benefits that exist. It might be Social Security, disability, Medicare, Medicaid. It might be Illinois Department of Human Service basic benefits, whether that's the old food stamp, SNAP benefits, or other cash assistance that are all current programs and that folks are eligible for but are being wrongfully denied. So the story I'd like to highlight is a client. I'm going to call her Esther. She came to Prairie State at 67 years old. Esther's story was that she came to the United States when she was 2 years old through an adoption. She was born in a different country, came to the United States, was adopted by U.S. citizens here, and they helped her naturalize at that point. So Esther became a U.S. citizen when she was 2 years old. Then fast forward through her many years of life, she worked many jobs, paid into the Social Security Administration retirement program. She then, at retirement age, applied for her Social Security retirement benefits, and the Social Security Administration denied her. And she appealed that, and it was denied, and really could not move forward with that appeal process. So she turned to Prairie State Legal Services at that point. Prairie State attorneys then investigated what was going on and why she was not being approved for her Social Security retirement benefits, and determined that the issue was the Social Security Administration did not have her identity accurately on file. Through multiple name changes that she experienced, first with coming to the United States and then being naturalized, then getting married, and then getting divorced, the records just did not all line up, and therefore the Social Security Administration was denying her based on the records they had. Prairie State attorneys then pulled together all the necessary documents and advocated for Esther both to the Social Security Administration as well as to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and got it all figured out. And the Social Security Administration then approved Esther for her Social Security retirement benefits, and at that point, she was also entitled to an approximate $25,000 back benefit for payments that she was owed that she hadn't received in the past. And it was just such a blessing for Esther, who came to us quite destitute, without options, and now is in a space of financial stability based on benefits through the Social Security Administration that she was entitled to. So really appreciate that work in the public benefits realm to help a lot of seniors who are legitimately eligible for their public benefit, but are receiving barriers that they just can't push through. Another area that we serve a lot of seniors is in our housing area, and I'd like to turn that over to Kate.
Thanks. So yeah, housing, as we mentioned, I think probably all of our programs at the outset, this is an area of massive, massive need, both in Illinois and across the country. So we could not talk about our work without including a discussion about our work in the area of housing. So safe and affordable housing is truly the bedrock of family stability. And in Cook County alone, there are over 30,000 evictions filed every year. So we are back up to pre-pandemic levels, and it is rising. Legal Aid Chicago helps to preserve family housing, family stability in two main ways. So one is we represent tenants who are facing wrongful eviction, and we focus on tenants who live in public housing or who have subsidies that allow them to rent in the private market. We also represent homeowners who are facing the loss of their family home, which we know is the equity in those homes that is key to building generational wealth. And we represent them when they are facing a mortgage or a tax foreclosure, in quiet title cases, and in other consumer fraud cases. So I'd like to share examples of two seniors that we represented in these areas. So first, we represented a 70-year-old woman. She owned a 3-flat, and it was on the south side of Chicago. She lived in the top floor, and then she rented out the middle and the bottom floor to tenants, both of whom paid their rent via a Section 8 voucher. So the middle tenant was a mom with young kids. The tenant on the first floor was an older woman who was approaching retirement. All three were in danger of losing their home. Our client had purchased the home at the height of the market, and at the time that she purchased the home, she was married, and she had her husband's income as well as her own to pay the mortgage. She then got a divorce, and her husband's income was out of the picture. And even despite the Social Security benefits that she had, her pension, and the rental income, it wasn't enough for her to keep current on the mortgage, and she fell behind. So my colleagues were able to file a creative bankruptcy for her, which enabled her to keep her home, brought her mortgage down from $400,000 to $50,000, enabled her to pay off her mortgage in its entirety so that she could live free and clear and without risk of losing her home. And this work not only preserved her home, but it also preserved the home of her two other tenants, because it is really difficult to find landlords who are willing to rent to tenants who are paying and using vouchers to pay their rent. And so by keeping them in that home, a home that was safe, that was stable, and in a really peaceful place, like they had developed their own community together in this home. They were all able to stay together. And it was just an incredible, incredible outcome for those three families. So talking about tenants, I mentioned earlier, we focus on tenants who live, preserving the tenancy of tenants who live in subsidized housing, public housing. And the reason that we do that is because the stakes are so high for tenants who are in public or otherwise subsidized housing, because they truly do risk homelessness if they're evicted. If they're evicted, they have no right to return to that subsidized housing. And because their income is so low in the first place to even qualify them for that type of housing, it is unlikely that they would be able to afford to rent on the private market. So truly, the loss of that subsidy just brings them one step closer to sleeping on a couch, on a floor, in a car, or to sleeping on the street. So we really do focus on those areas. And just 2 weeks ago, we were able to save the tenancy of an 89-year-old woman with disabilities who had been living in her apartment since basically LSC started. Nearly 50 years she had been in her same apartment. And for the last 15 years, she had been paying her rent through a subsidy. Now, her landlord, 5 years ago, had started charging her extra, requiring her to pay more on top of that subsidy, which is something that is not allowed under the program. When our client found out about this, that she didn't have to pay, she stopped paying. And when she stopped paying, the landlord retaliated by filing an eviction against her. So we came in, we were able to leverage this illegal overcharge in order to convince the landlord to withdraw the eviction, to seal the record, and to enter into a new lease with our client. Totally incredible.
Clarissa, Denise, Kate, thank you so much for being here today. More importantly, thank you for the life-impactful work you do every day. Your stories illustrated the impact of your work, and we are very, very grateful. So the problem in all of this is our colleagues who just left the stage are turning away at least half the people who come to their door. So we need more funding, and our principal funder is Congress, and we're on the cusp of a break, but before we go to a break, I want to talk about Congress just for a moment. We have two members of Congress who are going to appear right now. I wish they were here in person. They wish they were here in person, but happily, they are today passing our 2024 funding, at least for a couple more weeks, so they need to be in Washington. But Senator Dick Durbin and Congressman Darren LaHood asked if they could share some recorded remarks, which we'll play in a second. Senator Durbin is, of course, Illinois' senior senator and serves as the Senate Majority Whip, the second highest ranking position among Senate Democrats. He also serves as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Representative LaHood currently represents constituents of the 16th Congressional District, which spans 21 counties across central and northwestern Illinois, and he serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Work and Welfare. A big thanks to Senator Durbin and Congressman LaHood for their support and for providing these remarks.
Hello, I'm Senator Dick Durbin. Thanks to the Legal Services Corporation for inviting me to say a few words. Although I've had the honor of serving as senator from Illinois, I really started my legal career as a small-town attorney. Now I'm chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm acutely aware of not only the importance of advancing justice in America, but of the challenges we face. Providing equitable legal representation for everybody is a challenge. That's why your work is so important. 50 years ago, Congress enacted legislation to create LSC with the mission of providing high-quality civil legal assistance to low-income families. The 130 civil legal aid programs that LSC oversees includes 3 in Illinois. These programs help ensure that many Americans who would otherwise not have a lawyer will in fact have equitable access to legal representation. There are still too many barriers to equal justice in America, and it's up to all of us to continue to find new ways to expand access to legal representation. In my work as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I'm committed to making our nation more just and equitable. Thank you for 50 years and counting on dedication to legal aid.
Hi, I'm Congressman Darren LaHood, and I'm proud to represent the 16th Congressional District of Illinois. I want to thank the Legal Services Corporation for asking me to join you today and congratulate them on their 50th anniversary. Prior to entering Congress, I spent more than 9 years as a state and federal prosecutor and 4 years as an Illinois state senator. As a state prosecutor, I served as an assistant state's attorney in Cook County and also in Tazewell County. As a federal prosecutor, I worked as an AUSA in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I served as the chief terrorism prosecutor. During my time as a law student, a prosecutor, and a private practice attorney, I've had the privilege of working with the Legal Services Corporation of Illinois, including Prairie State Legal Services and Land of Lincoln Legal Aid. I have deep appreciation and understanding of the help you provide for my constituents and people throughout Illinois. Your work continues to promote and provide access to the legal system for low-income Americans of all backgrounds and is needed now more than ever. My district includes rural counties across central and northern Illinois that face unique legal challenges, and I appreciate the work of LSC's Rural Justice Task Force in helping to both raise awareness about the civil and legal needs of Americans living in rural communities and educate attorneys on how to best serve rural clients. The work of LSC to support rural communities is helping to change lives and provide continued access to legal representation. During my time in the U.S. House of Representatives, I have proudly supported robust federal funding for the Legal Services Corporation, and I will continue to support LSC and raise awareness about legal aid issues in Congress. In my view, this is federal money that is well spent and pays dividends for constituents and people across this country. I want to thank the Legal Services Corporation again for the invitation to speak and congratulate LSC on 50 years of hard work. I look forward to continuing to work with those gathered today to support equal access to justice for all Americans. Thank you.
We'll now take a 10-minute break.
I'm Abby Kuzma. I'm an LSC board member, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you right now our next speaker, the Illinois Supreme Court Justice Mary Jane Tice. Chief Justice Tice received her bachelor's degree from Loyola University Chicago and her law degree from the University of San Francisco School of Law. After serving at every level of the judiciary in the state of Illinois, she was appointed an associate judge with the Circuit Court of Cook County, where she served for 5 years. Shortly after, Chief Justice Tice was elected to the Circuit Court and eventually First District Appellate Court when Chief Justice Thomas R. Fitzgerald retired in 2010. The Supreme Court appointed Justice Tice to fill this vacancy. Many of Chief Justice Tice's many honors include the American Constitution Society's Legal Legend Award, the WBAI Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award, the Illinois Bar Foundation's Distinguished Service to Law and Society Award, as well as the Access to Justice Award by the Illinois State Bar Association. As Chief Justice, she has overseen policy changes to improve access to the court system for people with disabilities, and many other things as we will hear about. We are thrilled to have her here today, sharing her perspective on the current state of access to justice in Illinois. Please join me in welcoming Chief Justice Mary Jane Tice.
Your folks from out of Illinois here too, right? Your non-Illinois people here too, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for, thank you so much for having this event. This is pretty exciting. I had some time to listen to the earlier speakers. This is a really wonderful moment. But let me start to say it's a really fraught moment, a very maybe an inflection moment, I think, in our country. We hear a great deal of talk about how people are coming to realize the importance of the courts, that the courts are the bulwark of democracy, the protectors of people's rights, the defender of the rule of law. On the other hand, we also hear that all across our country, there is a declining faith and confidence in institutions generally, and specifically in the courts. So the National Center for State Courts every year does a survey across the country asking questions about people's trust and confidence in a variety of institutions. They just published their report just in the last week or so, the 2023 survey. And they ask people questions like, do you have faith in the United States Supreme Court, or the federal courts, or Congress, or the governor, or the state courts? Now, here's some good news. When they did that survey, the institution that had the highest rating of confidence were the state courts. Here's the bad news. The number of people percentage of people who responded they had faith in the state courts was 61%. Now, for the law students out there, if you get a 61%, that's a D-. Okay? So when you think about how people in this moment want to believe that courts are this important place in our society, on the other hand, there's no doubt that there is a crisis in confidence in our courts. Now, let me suggest that has real-world consequences. Researchers for years out of Yale have asked questions about why do people follow the law? Why do people obey court orders? And over again, when they do these tests, and they've done them a number of times through the years, the strongest indicator of whether someone will accept what happens to them in court, win or lose, is if they believe they've been treated fairly. So where are we? When 61% of the people who were surveyed question the court system and whether they have trust in being treated fairly. I'm suggesting that there's some deeper societal issues that we need to think about when we talk about access to justice. This is not only the wonderful, lovely stories we heard from the legal aid lawyers just a few minutes ago about how their commitment to service has changed so many lives. I'm suggesting that there's a larger societal problem when our system of justice is not perceived as delivering justice. So here are some statistics. We know that across the country and here in Illinois, in about 75% of the civil cases, at least one party comes without a lawyer, is self-represented. In many cases, there's an asymmetrical representation where there's a lawyer on one side who's skilled, knows the area of law, is an expert in that, and the other side comes alone. The largest area of law where both sides are unrepresented is family law in divorce cases and that kind of thing, where people have to go to court to finalize their family situation, but they go without a lawyer. Now, there are a lot of things to think about when we picture this access to justice problem. But one of the things I think about is when we talk about people being self-represented, what we mean is that they don't have a lawyer with them, and certainly that's important in the sense of knowing the law, knowing procedure. But when we talk about lawyers, we often call them attorneys and counselors at law. I think one thing we are losing is the sense of counseling. People come to courts in times of crisis. No one is thrilled to go to court. There's been an accident or a death or, as I say, families are falling apart. They come to our courts in times of crisis, and in so many of these civil cases, there is no one there to counsel them. On the other side of the coin is, I phrase it as, where are the plaintiffs? Pre-pandemic numbers, we've seen a reduction in civil filings of about 40%. Now, we know people are still having legal problems. That's life. And yet, for whatever reason, and I think we all need to think about it, they're not coming to the courts. So what happens when people are cheated, when they know their rights have been denied, but they don't come to a place that can right those wrongs? We talk about courts as being a place, our system being a place where we could resolve disputes peaceably. What happens when those disputes are not coming to our courts, not being resolved peaceably? What happens to the fabric of our society? We talked a moment, and I heard some of the earlier speakers mention the idea of legal deserts. Our demographics in our state and many states are changing. So, for example, a study recently showed that in Cook County, there are more lawyers than the entire nation of Japan. In 35 of the 102 counties in Illinois, there are 10 or fewer practitioners. In 13 counties in Illinois, there are 5 or fewer lawyers. So there's probably one person is a judge, one person is elected as the prosecutor, and my feeling is probably the other 3 are making a lot of money doing wills and trusts, right? But people are having all sorts of legal problems, and there are not lawyers in those areas. So we're here to celebrate legal aid and the Legal Services Corporation, but let's be honest. Another statistic I've seen is that there are less than 400 legal aid attorneys in our state. In 7 of our 24 circuits, there are no legal aid attorneys. All this wonderful work that you've been hearing, there are only so many lawyers who are devoting their careers to legal aid. Outside of Cook County, there's 1 legal aid attorney for every 10,000 low-income residents. Now, this change in our court system, where you picture the judge sitting up high and there are 2 lawyers and they argue brilliant points of law and the judge chooses one side or the other, that's an adversarial system that our system is based on. And that's not what our courts look like today. Our procedures, our rules, our precedent are all built on the adversarial system. But what do we do now when the people who come to our courts in times of crisis are not prepared for that kind of a system? So I'm proud to say that Illinois has embraced these issues, these challenges, for a very long time. I'm proud to say that we've taken many different steps to try to begin, at least, to address some of these issues. So, for example, just recently, our Code of Judicial Conduct, our Ethics Code, which I want you to know from the very beginning of its drafting has always applied to members of the Supreme Court as well as every other judge in the state. So a core early canon of judicial ethics says, Rule Canon 2, a judge shall uphold and apply the law and shall perform all duties of judicial office fairly and impartially. And just recently that rule has been changed to add a comment to say, it is not a violation of this rule for a judge to make reasonable accommodations to ensure pro se litigants the opportunity to have their matters fairly heard. It's now part of the judicial ethical standards to respond to the needs of people without lawyers. In 2012, the Supreme Court here created an Access to Justice Commission, and in fact made it a section, a whole division of our administrative office. And the Access to Justice Commission has done unbelievably wonderful work, some really cool things. So you have nothing to do one day, I suggest you could look at ATJ, Access to Justice, atjil.org. It's an incredible website. You go on it and it says, can I help you? It says, you want to start a case? Click. 12 different uniform forms in 6 different languages. Do you want to respond to a case? Click. All the forms that anyone would need as a self-represented litigant to respond to a case to defend themselves. And then on this website are all sorts of other resources, directions to help desk in courthouses and in libraries. My particular favorite resource is Illinois Courts Help. If you, might happen to you, ever get a summons to go to court, on the back of every summons in the state of Illinois is a website and a phone number for Illinois Court Help. And if you call that number, a real human being answers and says, how can I help you? They will stay on the phone and walk you through whatever you need. On our website, on the Access to Justice website, there are videos. How do you e-file, which is unfortunately difficult? How do you start an appeal? We have all sorts of resources for people. And another one of my favorite initiatives is Justice Corps. Young people, not getting paid a lot of money, but young people at courthouses all across our state who stand at the door and say, hello, may I help you? Do you remember back when maybe Marshall Fields or maybe even Marcus still does that. Most places don't, but here they are. They're there to say, can I help you? To the people who come to our courts, specifically the ones who are not represented. Another thing that I love about all these people is they tell everybody right out in front, I am not a lawyer. I am not here to give you legal advice. I'm here to help you work through the process. And the people that we've chosen to take on these positions usually come from the retail business or the food industry, people who are used to customer service. Because in today's world, we think about the people who come to our courts as customers, as court users. We're here today, of course, to talk specifically about legal aid, because we can only do so much with assisting and supporting as much as we can, providing resources to self-represented people. But we do in Illinois have a strong commitment to legal aid. So in 1983, Mark, I know you're here, in 1983, the court created the Illinois Lawyers Trust Fund. And the purpose of that specifically is to fund legal aid offices across our state. Now, obviously, Legal Service Corporation is a national effort, but here in Illinois, we have our own effort, the Lawyers Trust Fund. It's interesting how the funds come in. The funds go out to the wonderful groups that you saw here. The funds come in a very creative way, lawyers are required to have a client trust fund, a fund that holds client's money, and any interest that comes on that from the banks when you put it into an account, that interest goes to fund some of the lawyers' trust fund. But I think this is also really important. Through the years, the Illinois Supreme Court has made this next step, where every lawyer, every year, who must register, of course, to keep their license, they have to pay a fee, and $95 of every lawyer's registration fee goes to the Illinois Lawyers Trust Fund specifically to fund legal aid. So every lawyer in our state is contributing at least $95 a year for that purpose. Supreme Court Rule 756F was added in 2006. So every year when lawyers in Illinois registered to hold their license, they are asked to report how many hours of pro bono work they've done, how much they've contributed to legal aid groups. The comment to that rule says, this is an annual reminder to Illinois lawyers that pro bono legal services is an integral part of a lawyer's professionalism. So when this rule was adopted in 2006, that every lawyer has to report how many hours of pro bono or how many dollars of legal aid contributions they made, this was very controversial. I know, I wrote it. And people came to me and said, no, I'm a lawyer because I need to support my family. What are you talking about? Why do I have an obligation to provide pro bono or contributions to legal aid? I like to think, for a number of reasons, maybe it is this annual reminder. And I certainly believe that it's because of the law schools and the young lawyers who are coming out. I think our culture as lawyers has changed. I do believe that we've begun to see that being a lawyer means more than having a practice and supporting our families, that it's a bigger obligation. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said in 2014 at a Pro Bono Institute conference reception, this is how she described what lawyers do. Lawyers have a license to practice law, a monopoly on certain services. But for that privilege and status, lawyers have an obligation to provide legal services to those without the wherewithal to pay, to respond to needs outside of themselves, to help repair the tears in our communities. That's a different way of thinking about what it means to be a lawyer, that we have an obligation to repair the tears in our communities. You heard the stories of these young, wonderful lawyers who have dedicated their life to that kind of service. That's the kind of work that the Legal Services Corporation has been supporting for years. And that's what we're here to celebrate. So thank you to LCS for all these years of support. Thank you to the MacArthur Foundation for putting together this wonderful conference. Thank you for inviting me. And for those of you who are new, welcome to Illinois. Our weather is always beautiful. and our sports teams always win. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Justice Tice. Aren't we lucky to have such a dynamic voice in our Chief Justice? It's now my privilege to introduce my former colleague, my good friend, the Honorable Sam Skinner. He was, of course, U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. He went on to become U.S. Secretary of Transportation in 1989 and Chief of Staff to President Bush in 1991. He's been so helpful to me all along the way in this post and in my career. I'm so grateful that he's here today to help introduce our next speaker, Sam Skinner.
Well, first of all, the last few sessions have been mesmerizing. As a lawyer who's almost been practicing 60 years, they were absolutely mesmerizing. And frankly, as a lawyer who grew up in Springfield, Illinois, and became a lawyer because Lincoln was a lawyer, I had no lawyers in my family. I didn't know anything about the law, but Lincoln was a lawyer. That was my role model. I became a lawyer. And I never thought about it, and I'm still an active practitioner. And I love every minute of it. But when you can get the energy that you get now, the respect for these people that are doing what they're doing, number one, it just embodies you to do more. So John, that was a really terrific, and I'm just saying, where do these people come from? Where do these people come from that every day are doing what they're doing? And so thanks you to all those that did it, and thank you. It really, we don't say thank you enough in our life, and so when we see people like this, tell them all thank you, and when you see them on the street, thank you, because they need it. They're doing the Lord's work, and they're doing it for less than most people appreciate. They think they might make, and they're just doing great work. So, and we need more of them. And I was figuring out, well, I said, we want $1.5 billion, and we have a $4.2 trillion budget. So there's some room in there for more money. And this is really a call to action. And I think that's what John and what both of you are doing, is a call to action. I became a lawyer, and as John said, and I joined my first practice. I graduated from DePaul in '66, went to Knight Law School, in wanted to be an assistant U.S. attorney. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do, and I went for it for 2 years. And Chris was here a few minutes ago. One of the people who was instrumental was a protege of his father, Robert Kennedy, who helped me get into the Justice Department, and I started there and became an assistant U.S. attorney and rose up through the ranks. But in '75, the current U.S. attorney decided to leave. At the same time, a man named Edward Levy was being appointed Attorney General of the United States. And I couldn't even mention his name without in awe. And all of a sudden, I found out I've got an interview with Edward Levy in Washington, D.C. And I'm thinking, and I've been in the Attorney General's office before, but not with someone of that stature who come with that reputation. And I was very nervous. And all of a sudden, he immediately made you feel comfortable. And he said to me, he said, well, you're going to learn a lot in your new job. And I said, yes, sir, I am. I've only been a lawyer six years, and I'm going to be a United States attorney. I can't believe it. He says, well, I'm new to the job. We're both going to learn together. And we did. He was a role model for me. He was an unbelievable person to work with. And he would consult with you, but he would ask your opinion and then listen. And he asked me, and because I was his hometown U.S. attorney, he didn't want me to fail, because he's my attorney general, and I'd had 9 of them. I didn't want him to fail, and especially one from Chicago who what he represented, and he wasn't. And he went on to become, in the 2 years he was attorney general, one of the finest, if not the finest, attorney generals in our history. And by the way, on that list, there's 2 or 3 others, but one of them is Bobby Kennedy, Chris's dad, who in a short period of time changed a lot of things as well. So I had the opportunity to meet with Robert Kennedy briefly in 1968 before I was sworn in. But my mom told me when I was growing up, associate yourself with good people, they'll bring you up. Well, she really told me a different way. She said, when I was sitting next to some very sharp person at IBM training, and I went home and told my mom I was sitting next to him and she knew of him, she said, sit next to him, he's smart. I'm not sure what she meant by that, but she was telling me hang out with good people. Well, first of all, my boss is United States Attorney, is Edward Levy. How could you have a better boss? How could you have a better person? How could you associate yourself with better people? And little did I know that that venture would lead to a lifetime of Levy's. It's ironic. I started working for Ed Levy. Sorry, I never called him Ed Levy, by the way. I never called him Edward. I called him Sir. I debated President, Dean. I couldn't quite figure out what to call him, so I called him Sir. He would say Sam, and I'd say Sir. But he was easy to talk to. He led the department at the worst time of his life, and he became a dear friend. And he would talk occasionally about David. His son was in college at the time, and his younger kids. But I didn't really identify with him. And then after I left office, I joined Sidley in Austin, and I met his son, John. And I want to tell you, because John wanted me to introduce me, because he was afraid to introduce his brother, so he wanted me to do it, so I'm doing it. But I get a chance to talk about John for just a minute, and I think we ought to. John, what John has done, John is a life force. John is organized, John is thorough, John is kind, he is nice, he's in his image of his dad. That's the kind of person his dad was. So his mother's was that way, too. I knew them both. John, what he has done with this Legal Services Corporation is nothing short than magnificent. It started right in '75 when Attorney General Levy and I were there, and it started out and what he's done today, and there's room to go. I would just may say that we need a plan of action afterward, and we want $1.5 billion, and our budget for the federal government is $4.4 trillion. Anyone wants to figure that out, there's plenty of room for some more money. I hope we can get it. But the other one then, I thought, John said David. Well, I followed David. I didn't know him well, but I followed David all his career. First of all, he followed his father. He got a PhD. Doesn't talk about much about that. In history, didn't talk much about that. But then he decided he wanted to do what I wanted to do, ironically, is to go into public service as an assistant United States attorney after clerking at the court. Then we watched him as he grew his career, and John and I talked about it all the time. And then he went on to become United States attorney in Sacramento. And then he became a United States district judge and a rock star. He was called upon to do all kinds of things like that. Then he decided after all of that, he wanted to get back to where his dad was, a dean of a major law school. So he went back, and my son and grandson went to Duke, neither to the law school. I tried to get in. They didn't even open my envelope. But he took on the deanship at Duke and took that law school to a next level. And he did so with the same style and class that his dad did. And then he's decided that enough's enough. He goes back and he does this, he does that, he does this. You want to read his bio? Go on Google. It takes this long to find him. All the things he's done, all giving back. And now he's doing that with ALI. So we have got a superstar. The Levys are a superstar. My mom was right. Associate yourself with good people. You'll learn from something, and more importantly, you'll be gratified. You'll be honored to be there. Judge Levy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for that kind introduction. And thank you for having me here today to talk about access to justice. I'm going to be speaking as the president of the American Law Institute, which we call the ALI, and as the former dean of the Duke Law School with its many clinics. John is my brother, obviously, and I'm so proud of the work that he and others at LSC are doing to enhance access. I'm particularly impressed by the way that LSC and its leadership have been able to navigate the stormy waters of division and partisanship that we see in the country during our time. John has been appointed by 3 different presidents from both political parties, and under his leadership, LSC's tradition of nonpartisanship and its important message that access to justice is a professional responsibility that transcends party lines are both thriving, and that's so important. Congratulations to LSC on its 50th year. The American Law Institute, which many of you probably don't know much about, has just celebrated its 100th anniversary, and like LSC, is also an access to justice organization, although not quite in the same way. The purpose of the Institute, as stated in its founding documents, is to promote the clarification and simplification of the law and its better adaptation to social needs, to secure the better administration of justice, and to encourage and carry on scholarly and scientific work. In short, to make the legal system more usable, more knowable, and therefore more accessible. From the very beginning, the concept of an institute of law captured the imagination of the leaders of the bar, the bench, and the academy. The incorporators of the ALI were none other than William Howard Taft and Charles Evans Hughes. And through to our time, the Institute has continued to draw into its ranks such extraordinary lawyers, judges, and academics as Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ketanji Jackson, Chief Justice Margaret Marshall, and our new director from Chicago, former Chief Judge Diane Wood, and that's just to name a few. The ALI reporters that we use to write our work are among the finest law scholars that we have in the country. After 100 years, the ALI is still motivated by the desire to make a significant difference to the better operation of the legal system. Its restatements, model codes like the Model Penal Code, and the principal projects continue to guide and assist courts, legislatures, and lawyers to such an extent that much of this work has been adopted or enacted into law. Several years ago, and consistent with its mission, ALI member and immediate past president of LSC, Jim Sandman, proposed that the ALI undertake a new project on access to justice. The Council of the ALI approved the project, and the first meeting of the advisors to this project will occur next month in Philadelphia to consider a 238-page draft covering approximately and only just the first half of the project. The project is called Principles of the Law of High-Volume Civil Adjudication. The chief reporter is David Engstrom from Stanford, and there are 3 additional associate reporters who are also distinguished scholars in this field. Ron Flagg, John Levy, and others who are here today are among the advisors to the project. The purpose of this project is to suggest best practices and approaches to the administration of high-stakes but small-scale cases, cases that now make up the better part of the civil docket of the state courts: debt collection, evictions, home foreclosures, and child support enforcement action, among others. The reporters tell us that the cases that overwhelmingly populate high-volume civil dockets bring particular challenges because they pit an institutional plaintiff, a bank, debt buyer, corporate or municipal landlord, the government, nearly always represented by a lawyer, against an individual defendant, nearly always self-represented. In fact, in 3/4 of filed civil cases each year, at least one side lacks a lawyer. The reporters further suggest that given pervasive asymmetries in expertise, representation, and resources, continued adherence to unmediated adversarialism cannot be defended under any reasonable theory of due process or procedural fairness. The project aims to provide actionable guidance on how to modernize courts to address the challenges presented by high-stakes, small-scale civil cases without compromising either party's ability to receive a fair and accurate determination of the party's legal rights. The principles will focus on 5 areas: procedure and case management, court administration, the use of technology, increasing the supply of legal help and its uptake by self-represented litigants, and adjudication alternatives, including alternative dispute resolution mechanisms and dispute avoidance. A comprehensive project like this will help the courts and other entities understand the contours of the problem that we face and some of the innovations and possibilities that now exist for mitigating the justice gap. Simply pulling together in one place the considerable body of work that has been done to study the justice gap is also a great contribution. I'm very excited and hopeful about this project. As disturbing and difficult as the justice gap is, there is also so much dedication, as we've seen, innovation, research, and possibility right now as we try to do better. I'm sure that we can. I turn now to law school clinics. It's understandable that the ALI is so focused on disparities in representation in this new project. If there's one point that the empirical research on access demonstrates convincingly, it is the critical importance of legal representation to the outcome of many kinds of cases affecting low-income litigants, such as eviction actions. Representation by a lawyer makes all of the difference. Such studies as we have also suggest that law students acting within clinics provide legal service at a level comparable to that provided by more senior practitioners. This is not so surprising because the students are really good and dedicated, and they are very well supervised by often extraordinarily talented lawyers who are also terrific teachers. I well remember that when I was a judge in the Eastern District of California, what a wonderful assistance it was to the court to have students from the UC Davis School of Law representing prisoners in Section 1983 cases. Clinics can also be centers of research and innovation. They can experiment and then study different practices and service delivery models. They can collaborate with legal incubators and pro bono law firms, and they can try things that individual lawyers cannot. For example, a few years ago, the Civil Justice Clinic at Duke, seeing an inexplicably high eviction rate in Durham County, convened a meeting of housing court judges and administrators, legal aid lawyers, and law firms representing landlords. While there was not a consensus on every issue by any means, what came out of that conference permitted many more mutually beneficial settlements and far fewer recorded evictions. Of course, the benefits to the law school and to law students are many and palpable, as the panel will surely explain. Many students come to law school with a burning desire to help others. Through these clinical experiences where they can mobilize the skills that they are developing through study and in the classroom, they get to do just that. And it is so motivating to them, and not just to them, but to the entire law school. And at a time when students and faculty are apparently having trouble respecting and understanding different points of view, it is also so helpful to have a cadre of students who are trained in effective civil, meaning civilized advocacy within an adversary context. And surely these benefits can be extended by more programs and by taking the clinical model into the law firms. I'm very pleased to introduce the next panel, a conversation with local law school deans about the ways in which their law schools are trying to help close the justice gap. This group of law deans is quite remarkable. They are all accomplished educators, scholars, and leaders. Thomas Miles is the Dean of the University of Chicago Law School. Nikki Booth is the Dean of the University of Illinois Chicago School of Law. Michelle Alexandra is the Dean of the Loyola University Chicago School of Law. Hari Osovsky is the Dean of the Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, our host. Thank you. Jennifer Rosada Perea is the Dean of the DePaul College of Law. Anita K. Krug is the Dean of the Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago-Kent College of Law. And Camille Davidson is the Dean of the Southern Illinois University School of Law. Moderating the panel is the wonderful Martha Minow, who's already been introduced and needs no further introduction to this group. She is the former Dean of the Harvard Law School. Please welcome Martha and our panelists.
Deans, come take your seats. You know, I'm looking for the collective noun to describe deans, you know, pride of lions, murder of crows. I think it's, I don't know, everybody's got to think about that together, but a cohort, a brigade. Thank you so much for your participation, and let's just dive in as we look at the academic insights into access to justice. Dean Alexandra, would you get us started?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This has been an inspiring program, and I'd like to thank our wonderful stalwart of providing access to justice, the Legal Services Corporation, and of course, Dean Osofsky for hosting. And thank you, Professor Minow. I have to tell you that no matter how old you get, you will never call your professor by any other name than professor. So I wanted to kind of start with two framing with this conversation. One is that law schools are essential and a bridge to the legal profession, and that we're all in this together. So every generation is called to meet a moment every time, and we are indebted to all the work all of the generations have done before us. And at this moment, our fates are tied together. And so I was brought to remember this today as I looked at my professor, who, when I saw her, and I shared this with her today, and I've told this story many times, but not with Professor Minow present. My first year, we had a big plenary to expose us to legal careers. And Professor Minow was one of the folks, professors who talked to us about what we could be and to not scare us into all the debt we could go into. And I looked at Professor Minow, and I said, this is who I could be. And I have remembered her career, and when she became dean, I did a dance in my office and said, yes, someone committed to justice just became a dean. And so when I think about that, and I think about someone we often quote, which is Charles Hamilton Houston, right, and the model that he brought together for us on how to do access to justice, and Justice Marshall, and we all know that quote, right? A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite to society, and that seems harsh. But we do believe that lawyers save lives. And what does that mean for the work that we do? Lawyers and law schools provide, one, entry to the profession. Second, law schools are essential in comprehensive education and training, so ensure the licensing and the provision of quality services to the communities that need it the most. Third, we are engine and engineers of pipelining. We are the vehicles to next generations of lawyers. And fourth, we are called to remember this. We model what it is to provide justice and what it is to be comprehensive vetters of what is the rule of law. And so at our law school and throughout these colleagues with whom I work very closely, we are busy trying to expand that entry with your help. We also are busy trying to disseminate this idea of the provision of quality services, not only to our clinics, which are essential, but to really trying to figure out what a holistic provision of services should look like. So I think today we think about, hey, we can't do it all by ourselves, right? So what does it mean to serve the poor when poor people, when they come to us, also have eviction issues, also have their bank accounts that they can't access? In fact, they can't even write a check because they can't get a bank account. Also have medical conditions that have to be attended to before they can even petition to social services to get what's owed to them. And that holistic model is motivating us in law schools so that we are not only working with our students and the lawyers, but also are working with social workers, are working with medical practitioners, and all of them are now starting to be embedded in our clinics. So this idea that our students are coming into the profession knowing, and if you've talked to us, you've heard that our students, this generation of students, have more clarity about what they want to do than any other generation before. And I feel like I can say this after 25 years because I've seen many of them and I know how I was, and it took Professor Mano to give me some clarity. They already know, and they know they want to serve the poor. But as you heard with the statistics, there are more poor people to serve than there are lawyers accessible to them. So we are that bridge, and we welcome this conversation.
That's beautiful, and your energy after multiple deaning is really remarkable. So Dean Booth.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting us to come and talk about not just what our law schools are doing, but so that you could hear the passion for what we do. I know everybody on this panel, and we don't do this just because it's a job. We feel it's a calling, and there's a particular reason why we do the interesting work, interesting, good word, that we do every day. When we think about access to justice, a lot of times students will think about individuals having access to the court, but really access to justice even starts before that, right? If we truly believe in protecting individuals' human rights, we're thinking about, do they even have access to legal advice? There is a significant portion, I think I read some statistics that said 80% of individuals who live in poverty, their legal needs go unmet. And a lot of times it's because they don't know that they have rights that need to be protected. One of the things that I think is critically important for us, and we kind of share this view as law school deans, is even though there is a standard that now says that we need to assist students with their professional identity development, it's something that we truly believe. That the law school is a haven and a place where they are developing who they want to be as a professional. And it underscores something that Justice Thie said, that she quoted Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in this privilege, right, that students have, that all of us have who have a law degree. The ability to go to law school, I tell them all the time, you come here, you feel like you're in this small world and everybody you see is a prospective lawyer or a lawyer, and this is the world. This is not the world. There is a large world outside there that needs your services and needs the education that you are getting. So when you have that privilege to have that Juris Doctorate, it's important for us as deans to make sure we instill in the students that that privilege comes with a strong obligation and a strong responsibility, not just to the profession, but to the heart of the profession. The heart of the legal profession is service. It's critically important for us in the law schools to make sure that we're assisting students in that professional development. And if it means that at the heart of the profession it is service, what does that mean? Yes, some of them want to come to law school to make the big bucks and have, an elaborate lifestyle. You can still do that if you want to, but you're still in a profession that you chose to become a member of, and you still have an obligation to serve in some capacity. Whether you do it as your regular 9 to 5 or 7 to 7, as our schedules usually are, or you do it pro bono as your pro bono work, it's an obligation that you have to have the privilege that you have been given to come to law school and get the degree. And when we think about this obligation, the obligation is not just to serve, but it's to make sure that there is equal, meaningful legal advice and legal service to everyone. Right? If you truly believe the profession is one of service, it is a profession of service to the community, not just your personal community, but the community at large. And so it's critically important in law schools and as law school deans, we take that job very seriously in making sure that students understand the privilege that they have and understand the obligation and the responsibilities that come with that privilege to make sure that they, in some way, do something to close that gap that we have with the access to justice.
It's very powerful. Thank you. Dean Krug.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Minow, and I'm just so happy to be here. It's an honor to participate in this wonderful event, and I just wanted to provide a few thoughts about my perspective on access to justice. And to me, fundamentally, access to justice helps people achieve human dignity. And I think the project that law schools, I think all of our law schools have taken on to prepare our students, as Dean Booth points out, to service is absolutely critical. There are so many people out there, and I just think, you know, human dignity, what does that really mean? Well, of course, some people can't afford, can't afford legal representation. And, or they're, you know, sometimes navigating the system. It's such a maze out there. And a lawyer is critical in providing that necessary help so that people can get away from the harms that are confronting them, or alleviate themselves of a tremendous debt burden that is impacting their entire lives and everything they do, or anything else that is simply hindering their ability to be productive contributors to society. And I think it's just tremendously important that law schools do take on the project, to instilling in our students the importance of whatever we do, however, profit-generating our careers might be, that there is always room for that, again, service, that help for other people. And simply because, clinics have been emphasized so far, although I hope to talk about various other things. We have a very unique clinic model. I think it's actually the only one in this country that has a fee-generating model, and meaning that most of our clinicians who are excellent teachers still pursue legal practices in which generally it's fee-generating. However, even in such a model, and it's really a wonderful model because it allows students to actually work in a law firm setting while they're pursuing their clinic work, we have pro bono obligations. And it's incumbent upon all of our clinical faculty to make a commitment to providing substantial, and I mean substantial, pro bono work to clients throughout the year. And this directly, as I've been mentioning, the ability of individuals to access justice while at the same time inculcating in our students that professional and moral obligation to continue doing this work throughout their careers. And so I'll stop with that, but as with my colleagues' law schools, it's of critical importance, and I think we all take it incredibly seriously.
Well, it's really powerful, and you remind me of something that I quoted Thurgood Marshall before. He once said, in recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay the highest tribute to ourselves. So it's about dignity for all of us. Dean Miles.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a real privilege to be here. When I think about what we try to impart to our students about values and about access to justice and the importance of this issue, I have the great privilege of being at the law school that Edward Levy taught at. And so we have his example to inspire all of our students. And I'll just say on a personal note, while I never had the opportunity to meet him personally, every day I go into the office that he used to occupy. And my colleagues are quick to remind me about every decadal decision, whether big or small. Is this what Dean Levy would have done? I now happily have a colleague also who used to teach at Duke who reminds me, is this what Dean David Levy would have done? But seriously, it is a really powerful example for our students, and it is a great powerful example also for our graduates. Not a week goes by when I don't meet a graduate who wants to talk to me about the experience they had at the law school and the example that Edward Levy was to them. And so today, when we talk to our students about access to justice, there's a number of things, whether they learn it in a clinic or whether they learn it in another course, that's really important for students to appreciate and that we try to impart to them. And on one, it's almost, at a certain level, obvious, but it's easy to forget that access to legal services really matters. And it matters, obviously, for the outcome of the case, but as we've heard in the earlier panels, it makes a very practical and human difference as to whether or not someone is, for example, going to be able to obtain the legal benefits to which they may be entitled. That's really powerful, and I think so many, as we heard earlier, so many of the students who go to law school because they want to make a difference, and that's a very fundamental way in which they can make a difference. And then I think if we kind of step back and look more broadly, one of the things where access to legal services can make a huge difference is in the client's overall life course. Is someone able to maintain their employment if they're not able to maintain their housing? Or can they maintain their education and continue with their education if they lose their health services? Those kinds of things, I think, are really important for our students to understand and can be taught and learned in clinics, but can be taught and learned elsewhere in the curriculum as well. And I think the other important aspects that we try to impart to our students are, of course, concepts of fairness, about is it really fair if one party is represented and the other isn't. Also, really questions of accuracy about the courts. Are courts going to get the legal decision right when there's this lopsided feature about representation? So the integrity of the court's outcomes matter a lot as well. And then, as we heard the Chief Justice mention, and I think it's very important for us, particularly at this moment in time, to think about what does it mean about faith in our institutions and faith in our government, particularly in our courts. I think that one of the really shocking findings of the Access to Justice report was about the response about whether or not the respondents believed that the courts could do justice for them. And I think that is crucially important for all of us and something that we should all, I think we do, and talk about and impart to our students.
Thank you so much. Dean Azofsky, thank you for hosting us. Your turn.
Thank you so much, Professor Minow. And before I answer the question, I just wanted to say how honored Northwestern Pritzker Law is to host the Legal Services Corporation 50th anniversary celebration here, and to thank you and the MacArthur Foundation for your sponsorship of it, John Levy and Ron Flagg for their leadership, and of course LSC and the law school teams for all their wonderful work organizing this event, and really just to thank you to everyone in the room for the work that each and every one of you is doing to advance access to justice. So I just wanted to say on behalf of Northwestern, happy 50th to LSC. We could not be more grateful for 50 years of critically needed service. You know, my colleagues just talked about a lot of different ways that access to justice matters, and I sort of want to plus one every single one of them. You know, I think that, you know, we as lawyers, as legal professionals, as law schools, we have an obligation to advance greater justice. And more equal representation is just a crucial part of greater justice, right? If people come in to legal situations unequally represented, there's no way that we can get to the level of justice that we need. It's just utterly unacceptable that 92% of low-income people receive no or inadequate access to legal services. And, you know, and as we know, Gideon has not fulfilled its promise on the criminal side, as we've already been hearing about today, right? So here at Northwestern, I talk a lot about how we don't just have opportunities at this law school, but we have responsibilities. And when we think about those responsibilities, and we talk about them from orientation all the way to graduation and beyond, and of course, you know, the work of so many of our alumni, some of whom we've heard from today, and I'll highlight again later. I'm looking at you, Kate Shank, and of course we heard from the governor this morning. And of course I can't think about our alumni without thinking about your father, who's made such incredible contributions to society through a lifetime of public service in so many different ways. And you know, as Professor Minow knows, at orientation this past year, I actually was asked for an example of an alum who's been engaged in public service and was talking about the tremendous contributions of Newt Minow. But I wanted to just very briefly talk concretely about 7 ways I think law schools, and I promise I'll be super fast. I'll just like a sentence or two on each, but I just want to highlight, because I've been hearing in my colleagues' remarks each of these 7 ways, right? So the first, of course, is through clinical legal education. We are so proud of the Bloom Legal Clinic, which over 90% of our students work in different ways, and I have all sorts of different examples that I won't give right now of the ways that the Bloom Legal Clinic has critically served access to justice. Obviously highlighted at the beginning, the CWC's work, the Center for Wrongful Convictions and Exoneration work, but there's so many different ways that our clinic's involved. I also think the second way that law schools play a critical role in advancing access to justice is around the work that we do to support our public interest students and their pro bono work in law school, and pro bono work among our alumni community. I hope when we get to innovation, we'll get a little bit more of a chance to talk about that, because I think that we have opportunities to expand our partnerships. In this moment right now, with all of these people in the room and these deans sitting here, I think thinking about how we expand those partnerships is critically important. The third thing that's come up today, but that I think law schools, because of the interdisciplinary partnerships we can form across our universities, and I can give examples from our law school of this, and I'm sure we all can, is in technology innovation, right? We need to think critically about the role, both the promise and the limitations of the ways in which emerging technology can help expand access to legal services. The fourth way that law schools can play a role is around legal reform. And our clinics certainly play a role there, but we also have professors at our law schools and others who are deeply involved in this question of when should we allow a greater role for professionals who don't necessarily have a JD to help with access to justice, right? A fifth piece, and this is building on some of what Tom was saying, is this idea of educating students across the curriculum. Right? So it's not just about the work that they're doing in their pro bono work or in their clinics, but in every class we have a moment in which we can think about justice and these questions of access to justice. How is that occurring? The sixth is about research, right? We're all research institutions. And there are a number of people in this room, and LSC has contributed to critical research on access to justice to allow for data-driven approaches to bridge the gap. And I think that's going to be a crucial part that law schools can play in all of this. And then finally, 7, see, I told you, very quick on each. I think we have to talk about access to legal education. Before the JD study makes it clear that 50% of people or more are deciding before college whether they're going to go to law school. Those tend to be very privileged people. So how do we bridge that gap? And particularly, how do we bridge that gap when we're all committed to following the law post-SFFA, but we also haven't changed our basic values about what's important, right? And so how do we build legally permissible pipeline programs that help, whether it's in CPS, right, which is something we've been expanding for first-generation students, et cetera, to make sure that we are broadening who has access to legal education, which is a crucial piece of getting to the access to justice. So,
wow. 7, it's impressive. Dean Rosado Pereira. That is a hard. Maybe, is it working?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that is a hard act to follow, Hari, and I was worried a little bit being at the tail end that I would have nothing to add, but I'm going to add just a little bit of shape and kind of pull back a little bit, and I love what my colleagues are saying. I'm so glad to be part of this panel. Is I think that for law schools, it's not about what we offer, it's also shaping hearts and minds throughout the experience to create a culture of service and the development of servant leaders. And as everybody said, it doesn't, and it's not just for the 20 or 25% of our students that plan to and intend to go into public service or public interest law afterwards. It's for everyone. I have always been a real proponent of every lawyer has a role to play, and we begin in law school. We begin on day one, and then that culture and that ethos follows. And I want to pull back a little bit because I don't want to forget about that we all have value-based institutions, that law schools are not just, grinding lawyers out. We come with mission and values. So for example, at DePaul and many of the schools across the stage have values that are about service, that are about justice. We talk about our St. Vinny and how he asked us all, what must be done? What must be done? And we ask that question from day one. And even in orientation, and even when I'm recruiting law students, I talk about the reason why you want to come to DePaul, like many law schools, is because you will be able to serve and you will be able to have purpose. And we talk about our mission at the law school, and many of you have the same mission, which is to increase access to the legal system for the most vulnerable and uphold the dignity of all persons. So bringing in all of those themes. So we begin from day one. One of the things that we do, again, trying to, from orientation, as you said, we have professional identity. One of the things that we do, and many of our colleagues do this now too, is we have a 1L service day, where every single one of our first-year students go out into the city of Chicago and they do something that feels purposeful. And that's the beginning. That's the beginning of that feeling a part of Chicago, feeling a part of this community. And I think that's really super important. And I think what's also important is for us to model. I think it's not enough for the students to go out there and for them to be in the clinics, but for us to be out there in the community with them, faculty, staff, other students, upper class students, and our alumni, which we engage in a lot of our projects at the law school. But I will say, because I'm always practical, and I always want to say the other side, is that I'm not sure we have been very good. I think we chew at the edges really, really well, and we all are trying very hard. I do think we do have to continue to face the structural inequities in the system, and I think we try to do that, but that's going to be a full-on collaboration. I know the CLEAR Commission and others are working at trying to get at those core and root issues, and we law schools will be a part of that as well, because we need to do better altogether.
Excellent, and the ALI project is a very good example of that. Judge Dean Davidson, thank you for being here, and it's hard to be the last here, but I promise I'll come to you early in our second question. Give it a try, yeah.
Thank you all for allowing the downstate dean to join the Chicago deans. So I was in town today, so I was here listening, so I appreciate the opportunity to share with you. Our institution is one that was actually founded by the legislature in the public interest to serve the public good. And so at the forefront of all that we do, we stay true to that mission. And the founding dean, Hiram Lazar, was from Southern Illinois. And he came to Southern Illinois as the founding dean because he recognized that there was a need for access to justice in that area. So often when we think about the state of Illinois, we think Chicago, and we forget about the rest of the state. And the region in which we serve, there are so many legal deserts. And so not only are we training our students to think about access to justice and providing for the community post-graduation, they are hands-on while they are in school. Our clinics do serve the 16 most southernmost counties in the state, and in several of those counties there are 1 to 2 attorneys, and a few there are no attorneys. And it's so important, as my colleagues have stated along the way, that there are so many situations when we think about humanity and issues that folks have. If they had someone to talk to, so many of those issues could be prevented. And so I want to shout out to the Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism, because they do come into each of our schools at the beginning of the school year, and all of the law students at all of the law schools in Illinois, and I do believe we are on the cutting edge with respect to states that do this. All of our students do an oath of professionalism. So all of our students are beginning their legal career thinking about that golden ticket that they will have when they graduate. The golden ticket only works if you pay it forward. It does no good to serve yourself. We're only as strong as our weakest link. So I won't take up any more time, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you, Northwestern Pritzker, for hosting, and thank you all.
Really wonderful. We are a great panel. We are on time, but we started late. So I'm going to ask a second question and make it a lightning round. And we're going to talk about one, at most, 2 examples, okay? 2 examples from your law school of innovation, community impact, service to the profession. Got it? Lightning round. Dean Rosata Pereira.
Okay, 2 examples. And I'm not going to take clinical examples because I think clinics are something we all do, but a few ways that we try to scale up a little bit and expand access to justice. The first is our Immigration and Asylum Clinic has what's called a technical assistance project that actually works with 30 community-based organizations to expand the representation in immigration and asylum across Northern Illinois. The second is called NLAP, and it is embedded in the South Loop that we're rebooting, includes students and faculty and alumni, and they are doing things like expungement and getting IDs for the unhoused to be able to begin their lives anew.
Outstanding. Dean Ozofsky.
All right, so I also want to highlight I'm going to highlight something from our clinical space, right? So as I said, our clinics have been involved in all sorts of different access to justice, but in particular, I want to highlight both the work that our Children and Family Justice Centers played in doing a study, a multi-year interdisciplinary study showing that public defense in Illinois is in a state of crisis, and it's involved in really important advocacy work around that, as well as our Siegel Clinic for Immigrant Youth and Families and the work it's been doing around migrants and some of the pop-ups there. But the second example I want to give is one around technology, because I think it's important for us to highlight that work as well. And in particular, our innovation lab, which is led by Professor Dan Luna and CS Professor Chris Hammond, has been working on 2 projects with the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. So in one, they worked on improving LCBH's chatbot reintervention, which helps tenants with a variety of problems with landlords. And they worked on improving reintervention's ability to identify legal issues and natural language explanations of problems, inputs by tenants, and also worked on a help desk. And so I think there's opportunities in the clinical space. We all could give a bunch more examples, but those are my 2.
It's fantastic and more promising than the lawyer who went into court with some chat GPT responses and totally made up cases. So this is the way to do it. So Dean Davidson.
Thank you so much. 2 things that I would like to highlight. The first is our students are engaged in building the pipeline of future attorneys. There's so many people who don't know what attorneys do. There's so many young people who don't believe that it's something that they can do. So we are actively involved in the high schools and the elementary schools. And I think it's on us as law schools, as service providers, to begin to build that pipeline with students as early as 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. So excited about that. The other example is our medical legal partnerships. Our law students, first-year law students, and our first-year medical students and first-year PA students come together and work on projects. With our veterans, our projects allow the first-year law students to work on the legal side, allow the first-year medical students to review the medical side, and so from the very beginning, gives the opportunity for students to have that holistic look that Professor Dean Alexandra talked about from the very beginning of law school.
Fantastic. Dean Miles.
Thank you. I will mention it's 2 things. One, a clinical related, and this is a tough call because Chicago has a rich set of clinics, and so I'm going to pick one and mention one, make one friend and make a lot of enemies. I'm not mentioning everyone. And that is that our housing clinic has a long-standing partnership with Legal Aid Chicago in representing tenants, and it's such a great relationship for us, important legal representation, and a great educational experience for our students. So we're very proud of that. The other thing that I will mention is not clinical related, and that is that we have had for several years what we call a pro bono challenge for our students, and that's a challenge that the students do at least 50 hours of pro bono legal service before they graduate. I think they do that over 3 years. That's not a lot of time. But I've been really impressed by our students and the uptake on this. And it means that in recent years, our graduating class has given over 15,000 hours of pro bono legal service, which means that not only does every one of them meet the pledge on average, but they exceed it by 50%. And so it's really something that I think we do to try to impart the importance of pro bono legal service, no matter where people go in their careers.
Fantastic. Dean Kruk.
So the first thing I want to mention is Chicago-Kent's Public Interest Center, which has as its mission increasing pro bono and community service among our students, and overall expanding access to justice in the community, and just a couple of things they do. Currently, there is a group of Chicago-Kent students that participate in a program with Legal Aid Chicago in the Austin community in the west side of Chicago, and they assist people with family law, criminal record, expungement, housing issues, and so forth. And the Public Interest Center, along with our Immigration Law Society, in collaboration with the Children's Legal Center, host asylum or temporary protected status clinics that serves over 70 migrant, that has been serving over 70 migrant families. The second thing I want to mention is Chicago-Kent's Self-Help Resource Center, where each week at the Daly Center, about 25 Chicago-Kent law students volunteer to help pro se litigants with access vital information in order to file their case with the Cook County Circuit Court, and basically help them navigate through the court system. And this has been an ongoing student-led Chicago-Kent project since, I think, 2004, though with a little bit of a disruption during COVID.
Great. Dean Booth.
Last but not least, this is a tough call. This is probably one of the hardest questions to try to narrow it down to two, because all of our institutions, I know at UIC, we have a rich plethora of clinics doing all kinds of things, veterans and international human rights. And so I'll mention two, one because I think they deserve respect for their longevity, and the second one because it's not what you normally think about when you think initially about access to justice. So the first one that deserves some recognition is our Fair Housing Clinic. Just celebrated its 30th year. It's one of the longest housing clinics that we know of, and very involved with HUD, and the students have really great exposure to do all types of housing defense. So that one definitely deserves some recognition. And the other one, marginalized communities historically have been very innovative and have not gotten credit for their innovations. So we have a patent and trademark clinic that is specifically focused on helping low-income and small business owners who have patents that need to be protected or defended, prosecuted against. So those are the two that I'll highlight out of all the great ones. I hope I didn't make any enemies at my own school, because there's so much great work going on in the institution.
Well done. Dean Alexandra, take it home.
Okay, so very hard, but I do want to lift up the fact that our mission at Loyola Law Chicago is to train ethical advocates who will dismantle systems of oppression like racism and other systems of oppression. So in light of that, like many of our colleagues, we have amazing clinics and amazing initiatives, but two of them that capture some of this, one is our Kurt and Linda Roden Center for Social Justice. The reason I want to highlight this is that our Center for Social Justice brings together doctrinal faculty, staff members, clinicians, and students. And through that, they work on projects that are centered around public service initiatives in Chicago. They also place students in summer employment to get them trained in public service so that they will have a career. What we are finding is that public service, even if the students want it, they cannot access it because we don't have an intergenerational training pipeline, and that center is doing that. And also we are dismantling the myth that only certain faculty or certain people at a law school does public service, because doctrinal faculty are as engaged and as committed because of the mission to it. Second, We have, through our Child Law Center, which just celebrated its 30th anniversary as well, we have an educational law and policy clinic. And that clinic trains students and brings them to the Chicago school system to fight bullying and to represent them in IDEA kind of cases. And that clinic runs year-long, and the best service that you can give to students is that exposure to these kind of really hard areas of law so that they can go and then they become legislators. And our students also go to the legislators, to the legislature in Springfield to fight for the rights of children. So I hope I did it
Awesome.
fast
That's
enough.
awesome. So I just have to say, law schools are a place of great hope because this is, next generation, at least my perception, is they are devoted to actually trying to make a difference and to remedy some of the problems that some of us older people have left in their wake. And every law school, all the ones represented here, are not only training up and inspiring new generations, they're also providing service every single day and also innovating and doing research. I'm still looking for the collective noun. You know, it's a pride of lions. I think it's a thrill of deans. A thrill of deans. So please join me in thanking the law school deans.
Thank you, Professor Minow, and thank you to all the deans for all the work you do and for joining us here today. It is truly inspiring to hear all the work that is being done by and for the next generation of lawyers in addressing the justice gap. And you can all see why the Board of Directors misses Martha Minow so much. My name is Lori Mikva, and I'm a member of the board. I also am a proud former employee of Land of Lincoln Legal Aid. I have the honor of introducing our next speaker, Chief District Judge Rebecca Pallmeyer of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. Chief Judge Pallmeyer has served as a district court judge since 1998. She became the chief judge in 2019, the first woman to serve in that role in the 200-year history of the court. Sorry, I'm almost done. Prior to appointment to the district court, Judge Pallmeyer served as an administrative law judge for the Illinois Human Rights Commission and as a magistrate judge for the Northern District. She graduated from the University of Chicago and clerked for Minnesota Supreme Court Justice Rosalind Wall. She's the recipient of numerous awards, including the Justice John Paul Stevens Award, the Phi Beta Kappa Chicago Distinguished Service Award, the Chicago Inn of Court Joel M. Flom Award, and that's to name just a really small number. Judge Pallmeyer is a representative to the U.S. Judicial Conference. She's an honorary fellow to the College of Labor and Employment Lawyers and a fellow of the American Bar Association. She's active in the Chicago Bar Association, the Federal Bar Association, the Women's Bar Association of Illinois, and the American Bar Association. And please join me in welcoming Chief Judge Pallmeyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for including me in this afternoon's celebration of LSC's birthday. When I graduated from law school, the Legal Services Corporation was an elementary school. Now it's firmly middle-aged and can boast of the accomplishments and satisfactions that most 50-year-old professionals would love to claim. Or we might think of today as an anniversary celebration. Those of you who've had the good fortune to celebrate 50 years with a loved one may know that the traditional 50th anniversary gift is gold. Gold to symbolize wisdom, prosperity, and strength. Can we say that LSC has these characteristics? I answer that question with a resounding yes. So at the cocktail hour, I know the cocktail hour is coming, and I'm going to keep this short. I propose a toast to the 50th anniversary of this wise, prosperous, well, somewhat, and strong organization. But first, to comment on my perspective on access to justice. Of course, the services of attorneys are of enormous assistance to the court. Perhaps the most obvious service they provide to unrepresented individuals and for the court is convenience. Pro se litigants don't know how to draft a complaint. Sometimes they believe that unfair treatment by anybody is a federal offense. They don't understand what it means when a court has no jurisdiction, or the difference between state and federal jurisdiction. Let's face it, in some ways, federal jurisdiction is a concept that only a lawyer could love. When lawyers represent the otherwise unrepresented, those problems are swept away. We judges can then focus on the merits. And when there are lawyers on both sides of a dispute, the resolution will nearly always be a better one. Most important, though, when a lawyer is involved, the client is more likely to feel respected and heard. A litigant who has not only the perception but the reality of being respected and heard will have respect for the law and will have confidence in the process. So when attorneys represent individuals who would otherwise be on their own, they are providing a direct service to our courts. Now let's talk about how attorney representation of persons without resources benefits society as a whole. In our nation, in every nation, the need for a system that resolves human disputes is acute. Can we rely on the courts to be that system and to resolve disputes fairly? We can only if the public perceives the system to be a fair one where, in the words of the judicial oath, we do equal right to the poor and to the rich. If people who come before the courts suspect that the system is rigged, they will not seek recourse through the courts. They will not respect the results reached by the courts. And a lack of respect undermines safety for all of us. As Frederick Douglass said in the late 19th century, where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade, then neither persons nor property will be safe. Friends, we live in troubled times. There are sharp divisions among us, between red and blue, among classes and races, disputes about reproductive rights, about the border, about wars in Gaza and Ukraine are bitter and harsh. Lawyers can't mend all of these wounds, but there are divisions that we can reach across. Lawyers are, in general, of a professional class, well-educated, financially secure, if not well-off. Many of the individuals represented by LSC and by these law students we heard about earlier are working-class people or indigent. They have limited education. They live paycheck to paycheck, if they're employed at all. They are suspicious of authority, and they can be cynical about the notion of equal opportunity. Lawyers who provide legal service to the poor struggle to reach across those barriers. It can be hard to have respect or even sympathy for persons who are not only very different from us, but who have sometimes made what appear to be very poor choices. But struggle we must. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg observed that for the privilege and status of our law licenses, lawyers have an obligation to provide legal services to those without the wherewithal to pay, to respond to needs outside themselves, to help repair tears in their communities. Some of us are solo practitioners, but not one of us is truly solo. We are part of a society that needs us. In the words of Gwendolyn Brooks, we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And thus, when attorneys represent individuals who would otherwise be on their own, they are providing a service to a society that needs mending. A final comment. We've talked about how pro bono legal services, the services of LSC, benefit the courts and can benefit society. What we haven't talked about is the greatest value of the work of LSC and its attorneys, assistance provided to individual clients. One more quote here, this one from Eleanor Roosevelt. Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any map of the world. Or as the German poet Richard Daimler put it, a little kindness from person to person is better than a vast love for all mankind. For 50 years, LSC has been providing important services to the courts, to society, but most of all to individual clients who need them and whose lives are made better through the efforts of these dedicated lawyers. Indeed, this little kindness from person to person is better than a vast love for all mankind, and becomes the vast love for all mankind. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jim Harbaugh, head football coach of the Los Angeles Chargers and Duty Calls. I am at the NFL Combine today. While I wish I could be there in person with you all today, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to say a few words and share in this advocacy effort. I want to start by thanking today's speakers for their dedication to legal aid and taking the time today to inspire us all. As an American, really as a human being, each and every one of us should be entitled to fairness and equity when it comes to the justice system. The last thing that should matter is how much money we have. I've been a proud advocate for access to justice for over 30 years. During that time, millions of Americans still cannot afford the legal help they need when they face changes and challenges in their life. It's unfair, it's unjust, and it's un-American, and it's inhumane. In football, we talk a lot about the integrity of the game. Results can't be bought, they must be earned. The judicial system should be no different. Fortunately, I'm not alone in this fight. As you know, for me, it's the team, the team, the team. Today, we have a heck of a team lined up for this panel discussion, appropriately dubbed Leveling the Playing Field. Several leaders from Chicago's professional sports teams are here today to both celebrate LSC's 50th anniversary and speak to you about their commitment to ensuring the American civil justice system is, in fact, just. Moderating the conversation today is Mike Lafrano from the Chicago Cubs. Mike and I served together on LSC's Leaders Council, and I can think of nobody better to lead this panel. I hope everybody finds inspiration in today's conversation and engages in this dialogue with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Without further ado, please welcome Mike Lafrano to the stage. Thank you, and God bless.
The single greatest introduction of a lawyer. And like Coach Harbaugh said, this is a team effort, so we're going to hear in a moment from my colleagues, but I'll introduce them so you know who's here. Can you hear this? No? Is that better? Let's try this. Is that better? You heard the introduction, though, right? It was great. And like Coach Harbaugh says, this is a team effort, so I'm going to introduce my colleagues who are here with me today. On the far left is Ron Padmanabhan, Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel of the Chicago Bulls. To my left, Maka Scott, Assistant General Counsel of the Chicago White Sox. And to my right, Laura Warren, Vice President and General Counsel of the Chicago Fire. And if you don't think the cause of access for justice brings people together, consider this. I went to the University of Illinois. I'm sitting here at Northwestern. I just got introduced by a guy from the University of Michigan. I'm the General Counsel of the Chicago Cubs. I'm here with someone from the White Sox, the Bulls, and the Fire, and we're all here to talk about access to justice. If you leave here today, remembering one thing from this panel, to me it would be not only to raise awareness and that we all share in this cause, but that business benefits too. I wanted to be here today, not only raise awareness to the importance of access to justice, but to say to other business leaders, whatever business you're in, that our country, our economy, our livelihoods all depend on a safe legal system, access to a legal system, and equality and equal treatment of everybody. If you leave here today, whether it's fighting housing crises in Chicago, whether it's protecting seniors from fraud, whether it's granting women and children access to programs they might not otherwise be denied, all of our teams are here to tell you that we know how important this is to us, and we want to share that and hope that everybody here shares in that support as well. Let's start in our discussion today, though. I want to kick it off talking about career paths, how we got to where we are, and why access to justice is important to us. And I guess since I talked about kicking it off, you're the soccer person. Laura, do you want to start?
I will. Nobody better to introduce me than Mike. Thank you, Mike. Well, listen, thanks for having us. We're happy to be here and couldn't get behind a more important cause. So very briefly from my standpoint, I actually, when we talk about my path, I grew up in a house of teachers and coaches. I was the lone renegade who decided to become a lawyer, but my household was all about sports. So people taught during the day, coached at night, and that was basically what our family time revolved around. So it's great to be back in sports. I was a Division III college athlete a long, long time ago, a mediocre one, but it was very core to who I was. Growing up, I was always playing a sport. So played volleyball and softball, ended up going to law school locally here at University of Chicago, and then went into private practice. And while I was there, doing a variety of commercial litigation, did some for higher education as well. And with that teacher connection, I ended up going in-house at DePaul University and took over the legal work for the athletics department. And when I did that, realized, oh, I feel like these are my people. This is definitely where I belong. And I think walking in as a former athlete and then having grown up with coaches and administrators had some credibility there to speak to how sports could operate and how the legal requirements, and as you know, lots of growing compliance in the NCAA realm, were really building. And while I was there, decided I really wanted to be doing sports full-time in my portfolio, so got involved with the ABA sports division. Ended up going to a local event here in Chicago to support women in sports, and the person hosting me worked for the Chicago Fire and said, hey, you know, we're looking for a lawyer. And it wasn't a job that was even posted, so it was purely random luck and circumstance that got me in the door. I have been there now for 4 years, love every minute of it. And it is definitely an enjoyable job and a challenging job, I'm sure, as all of you do. And the one thing I appreciated about the job when I took it is the wide variety of things that the Chicago Fire are doing in the community. I think sports is community, and walking into it, I did not have quite the understanding of how much they were investing in the community, and that really spoke to me. And I think if there's time, we may speak to that here as well. But I think access to justice, access in general, has been important to me in recognizing that aspect of sports. And also, prior to my current gig, had the opportunity to represent an individual who was seeking asylum in the United States, pro bono. And that experience was so significant for her. We were able to get her asylum here, and just watching the ability to change one person's life because they were able to get access to an advocate who could tell their story made me realize how important it is that we are able to tell as many stories as possible.
That's great. Maka, tell us how you got to where you are and why is access to justice important to you?
And I know you guys have heard my story many times, but I started off as an intern with the Diamondbacks and worked my way up. That's the short version. But to make sure that I'm, giving some thoughts and some inspiration to some of the law students in the room, I went for this internship that was going to be 3 months. I bombed the interview, didn't get the job, called afterwards trying to figure out how can I get this position, because in my mind, that was the position I needed to be in the space in which I wanted to be in, which was with the sports team. I had been a paralegal for 4 years with a small law firm here in Chicago, and so I really wanted to be in the sports space. Took the opportunity to listen to the feedback I got after I bombed the interview. The next year applied again for this 3-month internship. Was lucky enough to get it with the mindset of, come in and do good work, try to add value in whatever small way in which you can for every member of the team, and that worked out in my favor. The internship continually got extended, and I ended up being with the Diamondbacks for 6 years through 4 different titles. And then the Diamondbacks had treated me really well. I actually wasn't looking to make a move, but in line with the personality and character of the people that I was working with, they saw and heard about an opportunity with the White Sox. Similar title, but expanded role, and so recommended me for the position over at the White Sox. I've been there since 2020 and now entering my 11th season in baseball. What access to justice means to me? Well, being a Black woman, part of classes that have historically been marginalized and denied access to justice in law and later in practice, access to justice means everything to me. I'm not in court arguing cases, but I feel that I can make a difference in all aspects of my life, and whether it's volunteer work or board service or in my full-time position. You know, it's finding ways to make sure that I'm doing my part in a small way, and hopefully it's making a collective difference. So whether it's, you know, making sure the right things are being considered when drafting bylaws or creating policies, or, you know, conducting investigations with integrity, you know, things like that, but just finding ways in which I can kind of play my part.
Thank you, Mako. Ram, you're not only a lawyer, you're a chief operating officer. What role does Access to Justice play in your life?
Sure. I think, I guess just quickly I'll answer the other question, which is when I went to school here, graduated from here, I left here, went to work at 219 South Dearborn for one of Judge Pallmeyer's predecessors for a couple of years, and then was in the law firm. I was a fan. I was not athletic, despite my attempts otherwise. Assumed to be, I was very comfortable with a private practice at a couple law firms, but a portion of my work for a long time was representing sports clients on what were really routine corporate transactions, whether they were commercial agreements, acquisitions of that sort. Actually left private practice, went to work in-house at a large public company, and but kind of like Laura, I had connections in the sports industry, and when the Bulls were looking for somebody to come over and take over kind of both the legal function, but just generally oversee some of the sort of administrative and operations stuff, I got a call and was happy to do that, and I've been there 10 years. My role has, as Mike alluded to, is now expanded to overseeing essentially the business side of the operation and liaising with the basketball side on things that kind of working together and trying to keep us connected, both basketball and business. For us, you know, Laura alluded to this, and as did Maka, you know, sports teams occupy a really kind of interesting and unique place. We're private enterprises, but we are identified and sort of represent and embody our communities, maybe more than any civic or public organization. And I think everybody that steps into if they don't know it beforehand, they quickly realize the obligation that sports teams have to the community for all the support that we get. And so access generally is something that we all recognize needs to be improved, whether it's access to healthcare, access to education, and I think access to justice slides right in there as a priority as well.
I wonder, you know, I think this is what happens when you're late in the day. All the batteries are done. Here, I'll give it back to you. You know, we often get asked, the four of us and our colleagues at other teams, whether or not the teams get along. We, you know, obviously compete to win on the field, but off the field we share a lot in common. And one of the things we share in common is a commitment to our community. And I use the word community writ large, that is to say to Chicago, to the areas where our fans come from, and our fans come from all over the country. And to giving back in ways that will help those who are our fans and those who are members of our community thrive. I know it's important to us at the Cubs, and between our charitable foundation and our team, we will invest probably $5 to $6 million a year in building new sports facilities, in investing in safe spaces to play, and in helping kids and others develop into what we like to call major league citizens. I know all of the teams do that, and I wonder, Laura, if you would talk a little bit about the commitment of the Fire to communities around the city, and in particular to access to justice.
Happy to do that. Glad to have a mic to do so. Yeah, I think, as I referred to, I feel like that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about stepping into this role, is how much community involvement there is. So we do operate a not-for-profit foundation, and we are building mini pitches all across the city of Chicago in underserved areas. We run youth programming in the Chicago Public Schools. We are in 50 Chicago Public Schools and actually train teachers to be coaches. And then in terms of access, not necessarily to justice, but I think access again to sport or access for those who have not been included or represented previously, we are training all of our coaches to be aware and fluent in diversity, equity, inclusion issues, so that as you are training people, I mean, historically, it's not just about competition, you're developing the whole person and trying to make sure that you can speak to the issues that are happening and also let your players speak to each other and recognize their differences, who may be left out, how do you bring them into the fold, and also recognizing their privilege, that they're able to play that some people may not be able to play. And so how can we bring the game into more and more communities and give them access that way?
Maka, I know the Cubs and White Sox compete on the field, but off the field, we admire your efforts and the work that you're doing in Chicago. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yes, I will. I think we do a great job of the community in a lot of different spaces. So similar to the other teams, we have a nonprofit arm. We do a lot, of course, within our sports. So trying to reach out to the underserved community and get baseball into inner cities. I think we do a really good job with that program. We've seen some guys go to minor leagues and to the major leagues through that program. We also have programs related to cancer awareness. And one of the programs that I think I'm most proud of that we do is we do a grant program where we give out to a lot of different nonprofits, but this one is actually employee-led. So nonprofits that may not fit within our mission or somehow don't kind of fit within those strict guidelines for our larger grants, employees can recommend nonprofits and do the voting, and it's all, anonymous, and, funding these nonprofits that may have not otherwise received funding. So that's honestly the program that I'm most proud of.
A lot of the same, I think, using our connections with basketball and trying to get kids out to play and then connected with community through basketball, youth hoops initiatives and things of that sort. The other thing we would do, I'd say, access to community investment, access to resources to empower economically. We have a pretty robust Black-owned business program where we highlight, feature, and help get resources to communities. We live in and reside and host people on the West Side. It's our responsibility to the community there to help people who are trying to get businesses going, to give them the resources they need, financial and otherwise. Like, access to justice also means how do you set up a company? How do you properly document what you need to document? And so we're active in that program and collaborate with some of our corporate partners who also bring resources and other financial resources and other resources to help, help those communities and help the entrepreneurs that are budding in those neighborhoods to be successful.
So we are told, by the way, we are the last panel between y'all and a reception. So we will not take too much more time. We did promise we would be happy to take questions from anybody in the audience. So if people have questions, raise your hand or let us know, and we're happy to answer them. And if not, I've got one more I will throw out, which is, I heard Chief Judge Pallmeyer earlier talk about differences between pro se litigants and those who are represented. And I wonder if one or all of you might want to comment on, we all see in our roles different types of litigation, and like any business, now and again we'll get sued. And I wonder if anyone wants to comment for a moment on the difference between pro se litigants and those who are represented, and how your approach to those cases differs. Ram?
I've not had that experience, fortunately.
All right. Maka?
I will turn this one over to Laura.
I got this. I have had that experience. I would say, again, to me, it goes back to being able to tell stories and how you're able to do that when you have access that way, but also being able to then educate other folks if they're not familiar with the process. So as we run into issues where folks are stepping forward and saying, hey, I have a problem, I have an issue. That is absolutely something where it's just, you want to engage with them kind of as a partner to the extent that they'll allow you to, and figure out, is there a way that we can resolve this when they step forward without representation, because they do not necessarily have someone to tell their story or explain how it happened. So really being open and receptive to someone coming forward, trying to figure out if there's a way that you can work together, because obviously it's in both your interests to make sure that this person leaves satisfied and is thinking well of your organization, and is also kind of made whole to the extent that they can be.
Terrific. Question, Judge Pallmeyer. We didn't hear about your history. You didn't hear my history? I will talk about my history then. I grew up not too far from here, near Wrigley Field in Chicago. Always wanted to play shortstop for the Cubs, and went to Lane Tech High School and realized I couldn't hit a curveball, and decided a lawyer would be a better career path. I graduated, as I mentioned, from the University of Illinois, went to law school, joined political campaigns, and worked in politics and government for a number of years, and then came back to Chicago and started practicing law. Was a First Amendment lawyer at what was then Sun & Shine Nath and Rosenthal, and then went in-house at the Tribune Company. And in fact, when I went in-house, I was told, yes, we own a baseball team, but don't worry, you won't get much of a chance to work for the Cubs, because there's lots of other lawyers here and they do all of those things. But it turned out a few years later, the Cubs were getting ready to expand and improve Wrigley Field. They were looking to add a few more night games. There was a need for somebody who knew something about government and city ordinances and could work on night game issues, and also knew the community and had grown up near Wrigley Field. And I found myself in the right place at the right time, and someone said, do you want to go out to Wrigley Field? And I said, sure. Can I play shortstop? And they said, no, you can be the lawyer. I said, okay. And it's been a remarkable journey, and in the time I've been there, we've, with the blessing and the help and the leadership of the Ricketts family, we were able to invest and improve a ballpark that was in many cases in danger of falling down, and is today saved for another generation, and is not only a thriving home to the Cubs, but a great part of the economy in the neighborhood around the north side of Chicago. So that was my path, and feel like I have been privileged to be able to work there. I saw another question in the back. Saw a hand. Yeah.
Hi, so I was wondering if any of your programs can benefit from maybe an extra hand of volunteers, like if there is like a structure already in place that we can contribute when we cannot have like a big endeavor between a full-time job and the kids and what have, but maybe at night that we can contribute a couple of hours to give back to the community.
Well, we have a volunteer corps group, so you can check that out. We do a lot of different programs in which the community can participate, and you can choose which opportunities you want to be a volunteer for, and it really varies. Depends on what's happening that season. You can even make recommendations as to some nonprofit that you would suggest we work with.
Other questions? Hearing none, thank you for entertaining us today, and I'm going to turn it back to Ron Flagg to close us out.
I'm going to go to a more reliable mic, although there's no mic more reliable than our moderator. Thank you so much, Mike and Laura and Maka and Ram. Over the last 10 years, we have found that unexpected messengers are often LSC's most effective advocates, and we are really grateful for the four of you to be here today and show your support for LSC. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you.